Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's in My Head podcast. I'm your host, Julian. Today I'm joined by Linda Simensky, returning guest. Linda, how are you?
I'm great, Julian. How are you? Thank you for
Fan-
having me back. This
oh,
is great.
this is without you. I mean, you talked about my shirt, and I'll move the cameras just around a little bit. Fans have seen it quite a few times. I mean, damn near every show on this shirt you had a hand in. So you can thank me for being on my show, but I'm gonna thank you for helping create my childhood and so many others' childhoods. Um, this is the first podcast I've ever done this where I've given the fans the reins to the show, the control pad or keypad, whatever you want to call it, man. They got to choose what we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about today, and it's almost a 50% as far as the polls went for who got to win and what they got to win. It was between Ed and Eddy. It was between Gendy shows with Samurai Jack, Dexter's Lab, and then Craig won it out with Powerpuff Girls and with Foster's Home for Imaginary Kids. Friends. Jesus, that's a darker story right there from imaginary kids.
Imaginary kids, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's Powerpuff Girls and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. And I did
Cool.
usually I save this type of stuff towards the end, but I told you we'd open up the show with this. Craig McCracken, I actually reached out to him. And whenever I have one of you guys and gals on, I always reach out to anybody that I've had on before, somebody that you've worked with, and say, hey, is there a story or is there something that I should bring up with my guest? And he had this to say. Craig says, and ladies and gentlemen, if you've been listening to the show this long, you know who Craig McCracken is. Shame on you. Powerpuff Girls, Foster's Home, Wander, and then The Great Kid Cosmic over on Netflix. But Craig wanted to say, he says, say hi to her and thank her for the trust and freedom she afforded us at Cartoon Network. At the time, I didn't realize how rare that is in the industry. Also, ask her if she remembers By George, the series I pitched her the day before I pitched her Foster's. Do you remember By George?
By George. No, you know what? I don't remember that.
Okay.
I remember several versions of Foster's, and I remember him pitching other projects, but I don't, it was a while ago. I don't remember them. But I remember a lot about it wasn't called Foster's Home at the very beginning of it. It had, I don't even know if it had a title, but the very early versions of it it was the one I remember was it was a couple and they had a baby, and the baby would imagine these imaginary characters, and it was about the baby and the characters that that kid would imagine. And what I remember most vividly was the dad in that was named Brian and looked like Brian Wilson. That I remember. So, the brain is an interesting organ. It remembers some things and not everything. But I do remember Craig pitching more than one project. And even though Foster's, the original version of it was kind of odd, there definitely was something there. And so that's what stuck in my head. I mean, there are projects that people have pitched me over the years that, like if we don't move ahead on them, I usually don't remember them, like, because there's just so many projects. Sometimes I remember the very, very worst projects I've ever seen. And occasionally I'll remember one that like I really liked, but then, for whatever reason, it never happened or it went somewhere else or something like that. But yeah, I've looked it's interesting. I've looked at a lot of projects, and I basically looked at like a new project every day, probably since 1989. And then when I left for Duolingo, like I stopped taking pitches, and I thought, oh, how am I gonna get through life without taking a pitch every day? And it's been fine, like I thought it'd be really like weird, but there's enough other things to work on and all. But for a long time I saw, new pitches every day, and I guess I missed that a little bit. But that's a lot of pitches if you think about, from 1989 till 2021,
Linda, I was born in 89. That is a lot of pitches.
That's your whole lifetime. I was taking pitches. Yes, and feeling guilty for being so behind on them.
Oh, no, it's perfectly fine. You got a lot of shit to do. You're a very, very busy lady. And like I said, we're going to talk Powerpuff Girls. We're going to talk Fosters. Now, just to recap some of the fans, the last time I had you on, we talked a little Powerpuff Girls, and you Craig talked about it as well, because I asked him the same question. Powerpuff Girls wasn't going to happen when it was pitched, right? How it was and how it came to be on TV. You had a huge part in making sure that cartoon happened. And when I had Craig on, I told him, I was like, look, dude, when this show first came on, I had to convince, because being a boy, it aired in what, 95, 96, maybe a little, no, it was Dexter was 95, 96. So I think it's 97, 98 was Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, I think around 98, maybe even 99, but yeah, around that time. Yeah.
So I remember having to, like, how they would pitch you shows, I would pitch my friends cartoons that I saw on Cartoon Network, and Powerpuff Girls was one of them. And just being boys, nobody wanted to watch a girl cartoon. My friends just didn't want to watch the girl cartoon. It was fun as hell. Mojo Jojo is worth the price of admission alone. Him, Fuzzy Lumpkins was always my guy, because being a Southern guy, I just liked, it seemed familiar. He seemed like a family member that would come over, old Fuzzy or Uncle Fuzzy. I loved the show right off the bat. But like I said, the show wasn't the same show we got that they pitched, man. So you told him, I think is what you said, was he was doing Dexter at the time. And you said punched up with laughter, make it funny, like you're doing with Dexter. They kind of went back to the boards. But going from your perspective, and I know it was a long time ago when Powerpuff Girls was in, what do you remember from the early stages of Craig pitching it not going so well, going back to the drawing boards, pun intended, and then it finally making the air? So what do you remember about that time?
So I do remember all of this vividly. So I can, I think I can give you, what I saw from this. So I was not there for the original pitch. The original pitch was, Craig was at Hanna-Barbera. He'd been working on Two Stupid Dogs, I think. And he had this project already because he had worked on it when he was in college. And I had seen it when he was still a student, and he pitched it and Cartoon Network picked it up, and they greenlit it for 2 shorts. So they were basically making essentially 2 pilots, and they had pretty high hopes for it. And then it didn't test well. And it didn't test well, I think, partly because it was more ironic than funny. And the girls weren't really developed at that point. And, it was a bit of like, it was more about the bad guy, and it was a lot about the fighting. And it was, and it definitely, it had a look that really stood out for people. And you could see there was something there, and you could just see that it just needed a little bit of development. And so they tested the first one, and it didn't test particularly well, partly because I think it was, it was girls, and boys were like, yeah, I'm not going to watch that. But then, they did the second one. The second one really didn't test well. And I was there for that. That was my second day at Cartoon Network. Ooh. They said to me on my first day, they were like, hey, can you come to focus groups with us? And I was like, yeah, sure. And the first couple were in, I think, Dallas. And then the next set of them were in New York. And I said, yeah, sure. So my second day at Cartoon Network, I was, getting on a plane and flying to Texas. And so we did these groups. And I remember there was a kid there who was saying things like, I'd rather stare at a blank wall than watch this. And, the kids were pretty tough on it, and savage, and I was like, oh, bummer, because I thought when I went to Cartoon Network that I'd be working on that show. I thought for sure, I knew Dexter had gone to series, but I thought for sure Powerpuff would happen. So, it seemed pretty obvious at that point, we should not make that show. But then, I always liked Craig. Like, he was a really nice, funny guy, and his boards were always funny, and he was a great artist, and I really admired his work. And one day I was, I should mention, people would always ask me, when are they going to make a Powerpuff Girls show? And I would just say, I don't know, but people did ask for it a lot. And they weren't asking for some of the other projects. There were a lot of other shorts. They weren't asking about that. They were asking about Powerpuff Girls. So, it's not like I had some, like vision that this was going to work. It was really more that I was just sort of observing that a lot of people would ask me about this. And these weren't necessarily people I knew, like people would come up to me at Comic-Con and ask things like that.
Yeah.
So it was in my head that, people wanted this show, maybe not 9-year-old boys, but people wanted this show. And so the thing that really made me move on it, though, was, we were starting to get to the, with Dexter, I figured there were going to be 52 episodes, because that was sort of like the normal amount. That's like a 4-season amount, 13 episodes in a season. So 52 would be like a number you'd get to, or 65. And we were inching towards that. And I started wondering how to keep the team together, and, what show they'd want to do next. And, I knew we could sort of go through the whole process of saying, okay, who's got a show, who wants to pitch? We were already taking a lot of pitches from that group. But I was reading a storyboard that Craig had done for Dexter's Lab, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was the one where Dexter fires Dee Dee and then hires a replacement for her. So all these girls show up, and they're all like, he's saying, okay, now knock over my stuff. Okay, now do this, now do that. And in the end, he decides, oh, I guess I really do need Dee Dee here. I can't. No one else is as annoying as she is, and I miss it. And it was a really funny board, and it just made me laugh. And so I said, the next time I saw Craig, I said, that board was really funny, and it makes me think that if you wanted to go back to Powerpuff Girls and make it really funny, like the kind of jokes that you put in these boards that are so funny to me, if you put that into a pitch, I bet that we could get this into production. And he said, I don't think so. It did not test well. And I said, well, if we had a really good pitch, I think we could make a case for this. And so I went to Mike Lazo, and I told him this, and he seemed pretty iffy about it. And then I said, well, if we did this, we could keep the team together when we get to the end of Dexter's Lab. And he said, that's a good point. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you the money to do it. And I said, I think that and this was one of my more sort of like reasonable moments as an executive. I said, I think if we're going to do this, we should pay Craig. We should pay him some development money, and we should even go back to his deal and give him a better deal. And that way, like, he'll understand that we're serious about doing this. And, that'll sort of get everyone on board, because, we will have to ask for more money for him, and we can make the case for why we want to do this. And Lazo was like, yeah, okay, let's see. And so I talked to Craig about this, and he was kind of surprised, but he did it. And then sure enough, he did a great job with the development. I mean, I think, I gave him a couple of notes, and Lazo gave him a couple of notes, but, it wasn't like a ton of notes or anything. And he put together a really great pitch that people still, like, when I show it to people, they still, like, it really sticks with them, because what he did was he made this chart, and it had, Blossom and Bubbles and Buttercup, and then it had like 20 questions, and as if each of them was answering each question, it would have the answers to those questions. And it told you everything you needed to know about, because one of the things I said to him was, I think you need to really differentiate the girls, and that will be a lot more interesting. And then you need to, like, sort of, explain their backstory. And then you need to make the bad guys really, they need to be really interesting bad guys, because everybody loves the bad guys. So make them really interesting, and really, like, figure out their world. And he's like, yeah, I got it. This is all in my head. So he wrote it all down, and then there it was. And when it was all there and it was all in one document, it was like, wow, this is a great show. And so, it took a little bit of effort to, like, people at Hanna-Barbera at that point were like all on board. They were like all the people from Dexter, everybody was like, yeah, I want to work on this. And so that was easy. the Cartoon Network, there were skeptics. Betty Cohen was a little bit skeptical. The head of programming in the UK was pretty skeptical, and they said, kids don't really think irony is funny. And I said, well, there's humor in here, and it's just so unique. I think it's going to work. And the truth is, I think that, if I had really thought it through, I really would have thought, oh, well, it's going to get hard to get boys to watch it. But, I wasn't really thinking it through. I was maybe a less competent executive at that point, because I was mostly thinking, this will be funny. And
Yeah.
Craig's really good. He won't let us down. We're going to be fine. Humor conquers all. And I really, I wasn't really thinking about the boy question. And so the show premiered and it did pretty well. I'd say the ratings were good. The ratings weren't like amazing or anything, but they were good. They were equal to all the other shows. So they were, definitely helping.
How far removed, I don't mean to interrupt you, but how far removed
go ahead.
are you guys from the initial test pilot to green? Obviously you won't be able to say, oh, it was on a Tuesday in 91, obviously, but if ballpark figure, how far do you think you're removed from that initial test pilot, those 2 test pilots that it didn't go well with the kids, to saying, hey, Mike, we have something here. Craig, make this funny, punch it up some. You guys give Craig a new deal, and then it starts airing. About how much time in between that initial pitch that didn't go so well to premiering would you say it was?
Yeah, I would say probably the testing was happening in early 95. Definitely the testing that I attended for the second short was that was October of 95. So I think it got picked up in about 94 is my guess. 90, about 90, about 94 is my guess. And would have been in production 94, part of 95. I think they premiered somewhere in the first half of 95, and then I got there in October of 95. So that would have been all of those early things. The point where I would have said this was probably, I'm going to guess, somewhere in, like later 96, early 97, thereabouts is my guess. And I could be a little off, but I think it was somewhere around there. And what I remember was that they were still at Hanna-Barbera at that point when we were talking about it. And then I think by the time it started production, they had moved under Warner Brothers and they had moved over to the Warner building. Okay. So the production was being done at Warner Brothers. And I can't remember if any of it had been done while they were still at Hanna-Barbera. But so that was sort of like a key moment in all of this, there was a very sort of political backdrop of Cartoon Network sort of watching Hanna-Barbera become, sort of subsumed by Warner Brothers. And then in that time, we started setting up our own studio probably in about 98 or so. And it actually opened up in the first half of, or early in, I guess, maybe June of 2000 or so, somewhere around there. So yeah, also, it was happening in sort of different places, but I kind of remember the initial conversation with Craig happened while they were still at Hanna-Barbera. And so right after it premiered, that was like, I'd say within about 3 weeks, Cartoon Network was getting so many phone calls about licensing and merchandising for Powerpuff Girls. It was like amazing. And they had to build up a whole department to handle all those requests and to, basically to license the show. So, the show right from the start was like a huge merchandising hit and everyone got behind it. And it was it was not clear who was buying the merchandise, but it seemed like a lot of, a lot of it was for girls. So girls were buying it. I'm not sure that boys were getting it, but I know a lot of adults were buying things. So, it became a pretty good uh, cash cow for Cartoon Network at that point because, the merchandising was so good. And I think that helped the show. The other thing was that it became this pop culture phenomenon.
Mhm.
So I remember my mother asking me about it, and my guide to is it popular? Like, is it part of pop culture yet? Was simply, did my mother know about it? If she heard about it on one of the shows she watched, then she'd know it was popular and ask me about it. And I remember she knew all about Powerpuff Girls, and that was my tip off that this is a big thing in pop culture. And something I remember about it, though, I can't remember if I told you this story or not, but there was a focus group we were doing. This was probably about, I'm going to say 2001, 2002 or so. We were testing other things. And then but we decided to do this just as a little experiment. So it was room full of 8-year-old boys. And so we said, how many of you watch Powerpuff Girls? One raises his hand. So at the very end of the focus groups, we had them put their heads down and we asked them several questions. And one of those questions was, how many of you watch Powerpuff Girls? All but one raised their hand this time because they couldn't see each other. And that told me all I needed to know about, Powerpuff Girls. It was the kids who were watching it didn't want to admit it. The kids who were getting the merchandise from it may not have been watching it.
Yeah.
So it was that, that makes it complicated. And I remember thinking, yeah, this show, probably by the time I left Cartoon Network, that show would not have been picked up. There would have been too many arguments against doing it. It would have been not a sure bet. So I thought it was good when they brought it back, because it meant that, they knew what they were getting into and they were okay with that. But I also remember thinking, it would make you think that there was a need for kick-ass girl cartoons, but I was never completely sure that there was. And then, Kim Possible basically took all of our learnings from Powerpuff Girls, and Disney was able to make Kim Possible into a big deal. Mm-hmm. I think, sort of taking what they could learn from Powerpuff Girls and sort of fixing some of the other things. And then, I continued to get these requests for a kick-ass girl cartoon. And that's when I started working on a project called Juniper Lee, Life and Times of Juniper Lee. And then I left while that was still being piloted. So I thought Juniper Lee was pretty funny, but they couldn't quite decide. Did they want it to be funny? Did they want it to be action? Could it be both? They didn't quite know what to do. And so I don't know what they ended up deciding, but I think that was just like maybe one season. But there was this idea that, what worked about Powerpuff Girls was that, it was a kick-ass girls cartoon at a point where, there was this need for kick-ass girls cartoons. But I really think it was just that Craig was what was working about it. He had such a unique sensibility, and it was not like anything else. And it pulled from a lot of different things that he liked, but it wasn't, there was nothing you could really compare it to accurately. And I think that's what made it so unique, and no one could quite replicate it. And in fact, I don't even know that they could replicate it when they redid it.
No, they didn't. They didn't.
Yeah. So I didn't watch the new one. I felt like I didn't want to, and I didn't. So
a bunch of people did. I tried dipping my there's actually a fan question about that, so we won't go too far into it before we get to that one. But there was a bunch of fans questions about that same topic, about why is Cartoon Network not doing more reboots of their classics like Nickelodeon does? And then the very next comment was, well, if you go and watch any of the Nick rebooted stuff, it's missing the heart, the soul that it had 20 years ago, because it's not the same creators, it's not the same artists, it's not the same writers. most of the time it's not even the same voice cast. So you have this disconnect, and you're trying to take something that was amazing back in the day and you're trying to force it onto a younger generation that just doesn't want it because they've been, I don't want to say inundated because it makes it sound like we're brainwashing our kids with the cartoons they have, but they have their own style of cartoons. Like our version of cartoons, my version of cartoons is completely different than your version, right? I came up with what you were ushering in when you were working at Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, and you go over to PBS and you were doing all this. So that was my era of cartoons. But what you came in with when we had our last talk was those classic Looney Tune cartoons. So diametrically different. You know, you have your style, my style, and then but my style was borrowing from your style, right? So it was influenced upon. But with whenever they try to reboot something, you can generally tell when it's just for money, because you can look at it and be like, oh, this is exactly what this is. You're trying to cash in on a project that made so much money back in the day. You just want to try to see if you can tap that well again. A lot of the reboots that I've seen do that. There are very few original content. If you go and look at anything in the past, and this is not a dig on Cartoon, I'm wearing a Cartoon Network for God's sakes. I mean, if you look at my room, there's nothing but all you see is Ninja Turtle shit. But around the room, there's nothing but Cartoon Network stuff. So I'm a huge fan of Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and Disney. But it's from like 2009 when Ed, Edd and Eddy came off the air till shit, probably even now. Look at almost every single cartoon, Adventure Time, I love regular shows, so fans don't hit me on that. You guys know how I feel about the regular show and JG in particular. That Gumball, a lot of those shows, like a lot of these shows looked identical. If you go back and you pull any of the shows from my shirt, any of the shows that we've just talked about from those early 90s, it was the same thing as Ed, Edd and Eddy. There's not one character on Ed, Edd and Eddy that looked the same. They all different. They were all diverse. Same thing with all of the cartoons from Powerpuff Girls to Samurai Jack to Dexter's Lab. Everything had its own heart, its own soul, its own way to make it go. And it's just like I said, whenever they reboot stuff, it's very difficult to get back in that mind frame that you were 20 years ago, because you're a different person than you were 20 years ago. You're a different person you were 10 years ago most of the time. You know, so it was with that reboot, I looked at it and I think me and you ever meet Robert Alvarez? Do you know Robert?
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah.
So that man is a national treasure. I say it all the time on this podcast. Man is a national treasure.
Yeah, amazing timer.
Yes. Oh man, he is all there still. Like his stories, both on air and off, ones off air, are some of my favorite. I won't repeat any of those because those are told in comments. But some of the stories he's told me are some of my favorite stories of all time. That man is a catalog for animation. Plus, he's worked on almost every single show any of us have ever watched.
Right.
Shit, where was I going with that point? We were talking Powerpuff. I was talking Powerpuff Girls with him, and I can't remember if I did it on air or off air, but it's not bad, so it won't get him in trouble. But he was like, I definitely didn't like the show because it didn't feel like it felt 30 years ago when we were doing it. It didn't feel, there was no magic to it. There's no soul to it. There's no heart to it. There was whatever the magic was there, it was not there anymore. And he was like, it was like a skeleton. It was like a robot. It was whatever you want to put it. It just didn't seem right. And I can't remember if he worked on it. I want to say he did, but I might be conflating him and somebody else. But we talked about that one. And the same thing you said, it's just, I don't really want to watch it because it's not there for me anymore.
Well, there was a small thing that they kept talking about with it that just felt wrong to me. What was so funny early on was it was about 3 kindergartners saving the world before bedtime.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were girls kind of took off. You know, there was a sort of a big girl power movement, but it wasn't like Craig created the show and said it's a girl power show. Like it wasn't about that. And then when they redid it, they positioned it as a girl power show. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not what the show was. The show was about the power of kids, and they just happened to be girls. And it became, look, it's girls can do anything. And it's like, yeah, that's fine, but that wasn't what the show is about. If it had been, I'd say fine, but it felt like a misreading of the show or a recalibration of where the show should focus. And I kept thinking it wasn't really about that. It was about being young and not being taken seriously. So I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but it sort of felt a little bit wrong to me. But yeah, I struggle with reboots in general, because I feel like there's something about when characters are created, they're created at a time, they emerge in a time, and they're usually answering a question that's being asked at the time, or they're solving a problem that's existing at the time. And if you keep it going that whole time, then I think it can work. I mean, I just was working on Arthur, and Arthur was around for decades, and but it was like the same team practically working on it, and so somehow that felt okay. It's like you can have a show for a really long time, and that can work. But like if they had stopped doing Arthur, and then if they went and found a whole new team to work on it, it would not still be Arthur. It would be something slightly other. And that's what happens with a lot of these reboots. They're sometimes, they're just as good, but they're not the same. And a lot of times they're not as good. And sometimes people will say, well, we're going to fix what didn't work on the show in the first place. And, maybe that helps, but I can't really think of any show that got better in its second incarnation. Can you think of anything where
shows? You can say Family Guy because that's been canceled 14 times. You can say Futurama, but there's what's so great about Futurama is the writing room. I mean, don't get me wrong, the animators and everything are amazing for Futurama, but the writing room. I had Eric Kaplan on here not too long ago. His episode will drop here in a couple weeks. But the writing room is just brilliant. I mean, almost all of them are Ivy League students, Harvard grads. So you've got all of this smart humor. And what's funny about Futurama is, like, I'll watch it and my wife walks by and she's like, man, that's the dumbest show I have ever seen in my life. And I was like, you would think that, but actually listen to how they talk and how they converse and how all of these characters. And then I was like, I want you to Google this guy's name. And she's like, okay. And I was like, where did he go to school? Oh, Harvard. I was like, okay. Google this guy's name. Oh, Harvard. You can't say it's the dumbest show when you've got Harvard graduates writing this. This is one of the smartest shows out there. But those are the two that come to mind. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I sat here and thought about it, I'd come up with something down the road. And as soon as we get off this phone call, I have 4 shows maybe that were better in their second run, but nothing really comes to mind when I think about it.
Yeah, and those are adult shows, and they're kind of at the same people. I think when you have different people working on them, it just changes things. And especially when I found out Craig wasn't going to be working on the new Powerpuff Girls, I thought, well,
that's the heart and soul he's missing. Right
there. It's like there's so much that he would bring to it. And I felt like, wow, this is going to be a tough job for the people working on it, because they have to kind of walk in and figure out what their version of it is. And what made it so special in the first place was Craig's sensibility. I did not spend much time watching it, and I guess it was okay, but I really liked the on the website they had a Powerpuff Girls character generator. You could build yourself in the Powerpuff Girls style. I spent a lot of time with that. That's what
What color was Linda? What color were you?
Oh, I kept giving myself striped shirts, and but I could make a little character that looked a little bit like me, so I was pretty happy with that, and I thought that was fun. So I did appreciate that, but I understood why Cartoon Network was doing it, and it was. My understanding of the story, and this is not firsthand information, this was someone telling me that someone told them this, but like somewhere within Cartoon Network, one of the other Cartoon Networks, one of the international Cartoon Networks, was begging for it. And I think this was accommodating them.
Yeah.
And so the US hadn't been planning on doing that, but when they found out that there was this big need for it, they said, yeah, we'll take it on. And so they did. So it was really, a favor to one of the Cartoon Networks, but which sounds nice. It sounds very accommodating. So, but to do something big like reboot Powerpuff Girls, that's a big thing. but they didn't continue doing it, right?
No, I think it maybe lasted 2 seasons and then it kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
So it didn't last too long. But staying on the good Powerpuff Girls, like I said, I don't really like digging into shows like that. I got a lot of flack for it in the beginning of this show, and most people take a lot of it. What you like is what you like, and if you go, sidebar for just a sec. I cook for a living. I've told the story multiple times. I absolutely hate it when somebody takes me to their favorite restaurant, because I don't shit on anything. I don't sit here and tell you what's bad about it, because at the end of the day, I can't do what animators do. I can't do what writers do. I can't do what voice actors do. So for me to sit here and say, oh, it's not good, that's all perception. Art is perception. You think something, you could think, I don't know, this can that there's an Instagram page that it's called Crushed Cans. Right. So the entire Instagram page is just crushed cans all over the place. That's art to somebody. To me, it's somebody littering. Right. That's what it is. Like I said, so it's all about perception, shows, cartoons, and all that stuff. But I don't like digging into shows, and I try to stay away from it as much as possible. But at the end of the day, my opinion it just wasn't as good as the first. Very few times can you capture lightning in a bottle. When you can, there is something special. And it seems like with these creators, they might not catch it in the bottle with the same thing, but Craig's caught it 4 different times in 4 different bottles, with Powerpuff Girls, with Foster's, with Wander, and with Kid Cosmic. And I'm pretty sure he's got a storm brewing somewhere. I'm pretty sure because Kid Cosmic, have you watched that one yet?
Oh yeah, it's great. I watched it right when it premiered.
So
that was fun.
Yeah,
I liked Craig doing that new look.
Yes.
I think he always seems to want to challenge himself, things like that. So I thought it looked great. I thought it was a lot of fun. And they're doing a new season, right? They did a second season.
Well, they got 3 seasons out all together. So
I
think back in February they wrapped it up. So there's only 6 episodes in the last season. It's phenomenal. And have you watched the first 2?
Yeah.
So did you see the PPG made a cameo at the end? Not technically, because I can't remember the acronym they used for it, but it was essentially PPG for Powerpuff Girls.
Oh,
so
right.
I can't remember what they used, and they were all dressed the same colors and everything like that. So
right. Yeah. I'm remembering that now. That was, he had a lot of little references to things in there, and so I figured he would do that. I'm trying to remember. I may not have seen that one, but
spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I'll have to watch a little more closely. But yeah, it's well, it was interesting to me because when he started pitching his next show at Cartoon Network, in my mind, we should just say, okay, Craig, here's your budget, tell us what you want to do. And they kind of gave him like, it was all new management at that point. Betty had left, and Mike Lazo had moved over to Adult Swim around that time. And the Cartoon Network was very much under the AOL Time Warner
merger.
Kind of, like that group of people in charge. And the person who was in charge at the time was very, very nervous. I don't think he liked animation very much, and he didn't really understand it particularly well. And I think that he didn't have instincts, and Foster's Home didn't look like other shows, and it wasn't exactly like something else. And I remember he was very nervous about it, and he wasn't sure if it was going to be good or not. And Craig had to keep pitching the show, and it was really sort of frustrating to me. And I kept thinking, well, this is Craig, and it's going to be the same team, and they're going to do a great job. And I remember the head of Cartoon Network at the time saying, this feels more like a Pixar movie. And I said, and that's a problem, because why? Is Pixar are you saying this is too popular? This is too accessible seeming? What's your point here? Like in my mind, calling something Pixar like was like, like
Uh,
the best compliment you could give something, This was like in 2003, and I was like, you think it's like Pixar? That's so cool. And this was a problem for him. So I remember thinking, um, that was a problem for me, that he was thinking that this was a problem. But like I had told you earlier, Craig had been sort of, he was pitching the show and kind of figuring it out as he was pitching it. And it just kept getting sort of more sort of figured out each time he'd pitch it. He'd get a little closer to it. So it was okay that it took him a while to do. But that was like in my mind, we just should have said, yeah, whatever you want. And that's kind of what we did with Gendy. With Gendy, he said, gonna do a show about a samurai. And we said, okay. And he said, it's going to be called Samurai Jack. And I was like, will it be funny? Because that sounds like it's going to be funny. And he was like, maybe a little. And I was like, okay, so what's going to happen? And I remember, he just kind of told us what he was going to do. And we all just kind of said, okay, just make it good. And, hopefully it'll be good. And I remember explaining it to someone, and I said, yeah, it's called Samurai Jack. And it's kind of like if UPA made Kung Fu, it's kind of like that. And they were like, that sounds interesting. And I said, yeah, I think this is going to be one of those shows that like, you can't compare it to anything yet, but like someday people will use it as a reference point for other things. Like I think it will be the first of its kind of like Powerpuff Girls was. Yeah. And and so we felt really comfortable with that. And something about me is I like doing everything for the first time. I like to be the first person who did this, or the first person who did that, or the person who said, yes to some weird thing just to see what it was like. I like being that person. Now, when you're that person, a lot of stuff goes wrong. A lot of, you make a lot of decisions that don't work out, and that you do a lot of things. First doesn't always mean best. And so people can then look at what you've done and they can say, I can iterate on that and I can get it right. And it's like, yeah, you go do that. And so I never really wanted to be that person who like looked at someone else's stuff and said, yeah, I can go get it right. Because that just didn't seem that exciting to me. I liked doing things that no one else had done, and just hoping for the best, and just hopefully they worked out. And so I think that's, if you're not like that, if you don't like that level of, apparently a lot of people think that's risky, and I don't find that risky, and which is probably why I'm able to do it, is because I don't look at it and think, well, here's a risk. But I remember with Foster's Home, it was a lot of people going, well, this is kind of a big risk. And I remember struggling to understand what was risky about it. And I was like, is it just that like there's nothing exactly like this out there, so it's a risk? I mean, like I was just a little bit into the risk taking and into the trying things out and doing things, which it's tricky when you just get one or two shows a year, because you live or die by them. Mm-hmm. If you have too many that fail, someone comes along and says, yeah, I can do better than that, and they probably can, but that's just me. That's like built into me. I'm a little bit of a thrill seeker in that way. I was always looking for designs I hadn't seen before, and things that no one else was doing, and like if someone said, oh, I can't believe you're doing that, I'd feel like, oh yeah, all right, that's cool. Or I've never seen that before, and I'd be like, okay, good. And that kind of feedback would always make me happy, like, okay, no one's doing this, great. And I always wanted things that seemed like they were trying something new, or testing something out, or some new creator. And not everything worked. Certainly there were a lot of misses, and a couple of near misses, and a couple of things that we were able to get to the right point. But over time, the more people got involved in the decision making, the more the decisions became like, let's make something that everybody feels comfortable with and everyone recognizes. And that was, to me, that was a little bit boring. And so I liked, I liked the thrill of like having an idea that someone was working on. And I would take the ideas and I would pitch them to the different departments. And I, for a while, I was using the accounting department to practice pitching to, so that I would watch their faces and I would tell them about a show. And if I got it right, they'd all be like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. And if I didn't quite get it right, or if the show wasn't that good, they'd have this look on their face like they didn't get it. And so they were great. I loved talking with them because they were, they had no dog in the race. It's like they didn't care what shows we were making. They just, as long as they liked them, and they only needed to like them as, fans. And so that was super helpful. And I found there were certain shows that I felt really excited about. I'd pitch them better because of that, and they were usually things that like had no precedent. They were just different kinds of shows. It was somebody just coming in from left field, just trying something out. And so I think for a lot of people, that's just harder to do. It is more risky to take that approach to things. A lot of executives don't want to they want to make more of what works. They're looking at what works. Okay, these things with these attributes work, so let's make more. And let's get, this show worked, so let's have everybody on this team doing a show, which I think is a good idea, actually. And then, they learn to, make a show, making this other show. And so they bring a lot of that with them. And inevitably, the shows are pretty similar to other shows. And Cartoon Network has a house style at this point, and they had one back when I was there. But I used to kind of play around with that. Didn't always work, but I always thought Cartoon Network needed to be broader than just one style. And so we try different things, and like I said, not everything worked. But there is this sort of like in-house style now, which is also okay. But that's why things kind of feel like other things, is because it's like the entire staff of some show that did particularly well, they all have their own shows now. So a lot of those jokes that they made that really worked in another show, they're going to make very similar jokes. And sometimes it's the same creators just making more shows, and they have certain sensibilities, and not everybody has as wide of a range as you might think. So you start to see a lot of similar jokes. And if they all worked somewhere along the way, you could see why people would use them again, or sort of build on them. So you can see how that happens. So it doesn't happen for a mean reason or a bad reason or a cheap reason. It just happens because you're keeping the team together in some respect. So what do you do about that, right? Like, how do you really get variety if you have a team that you really love and you want to give them all shows, right? So I think that's a lot of what's happened there now. That's what starts to happen. So you just have to hope that something's going to turn into an enormous hit. I mean, these days, what's a hit? Do people get to have hits anymore? The audience is so fragmented, right? So
it really is.
Yeah. So I feel bad for anyone who's trying to get viewers now, because there are so many things to do, so many shows to watch, so many more shows to watch. I can't keep up with them all. So
no, it's damn near impossible. Everybody's got a streaming platform, everybody's got a new animated show out, everybody's this and that. It's hard to keep up with. So one thing I took away from what you just said is, when is Linda coming back to run Cartoon Network?
Linda won't be doing that, but other well-qualified people will run Cartoon Network. And I think the bigger question is, will there be a Cartoon Network in 5 years? Think
Tell me.
about that, because it's kind of being, it's like, will it remain a cable channel? Will cable still exist? Will streaming take over? Will streaming go away? Will there be, will HBO Max be, the umbrella, and will Cartoon Network just be like a page on the platform? And, will that be meaningful to your son who's 10 months old? Will he know what Cartoon Network? Well, he will know what Cartoon Network is, but will his friends, or will they call it HBO Max? Because I've heard so many people say, oh, I've watched the show on HBO Max and it's a Cartoon Network show.
Yeah.
And I always think it's a Cartoon Network show, call it that. But they're watching it on HBO Max. It's an HBO Max show. So what do we do about that? And where does branding go? Where does Cartoon Network go and all of that? So that's the real question. Is not, if I'm coming back to run it, which I mean, I'm not, so no problem there. But so but the real question is, will it even be there? Will the Cartoon Network studio still exist, or will it just be, on a different floor over at Warner's? I mean, they're run by the Warner Brothers studio now. So, will the people from Discovery look at the balance sheet and say, yes, we totally understand why these are different studios? Or are they going to say, yep, put them all together and, call it all HBO Max? Like, if you don't know anything about kids programming, will you care? Possibly not. I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens, now with them all under, this new, what's it called? Discovery.
Yeah, it's like Discovery. I know Discovery owns it, so I don't know if they're going to put it. It's it's interesting what's going to happen. And until you pose that question, is there even going to be a Cartoon Network? I can't imagine. If you would have told me as a little kid, maybe in 30 years from now, there's not going to be a Cartoon Network, I would look at you, kick you in the nuts, and say you're a liar, because I would.
Right.
Anything. But now that you pose that question, it's very terrifying, because you look at it and you don't know who to believe as far as the Netflix situation goes. Netflix just threw out a whole bunch of axes, and I haven't read too much into it because I don't want to be depressed. So just looking at what certain people are saying, you take bullet points out of the article, but then you hear what some of the creators are saying on Twitter, like Jorge Gutierrez, Maya and the Three, Book of Life, El Tigre, and a few other things that he's working on now. iChihuahua with Netflix and the Fluffy. But he was like, yeah, it's still there, he's like, but nothing really happened. It just some reshuffling, and shit happens like that all the time in the animation industry.
Right. Yeah.
People come in,
Yep.
new. I mean, it happened in Cartoon Network a couple different times. Fred Simon. Then they had a new guy that was in charge, and a new person after that, and a new person now. I mean, so it's ever changing and it's ever evolving. But I just can't imagine a world where there's not a Cartoon Network. And since we're on a hypothetical chain right now, I know you're having a bunch of fun at your current job in Duolingo. So this is just a hypothetical. So if Duolingo listens, I'm not trying to sway Miss Linda to go to Cartoon Network again. However, do you ever see yourself in a hypothetical situation, possibly going back, if Cartoon Network's still around, to run Cartoon Network? Would you like that job, or would that just be, I've done that already?
Yeah, I've done it already. I mean, I did. I feel like I worked at Cartoon Network at such an amazing time. Like it was so amazing. And I remember there was one point where like, oh, it was the day that the Screwy Squirrel April Fool's Day gag and like mayhem was ensuing. And I looked at the person next to me, Khaki Jones, and I said to her, yeah, we're gonna look back at this time and be like, wow, that was the best. And she said, really? Are we really gonna do this? And I said, yeah, we are, because this is the best. And I remember feeling that way for several years. I remember sitting with like the whole management team at a point just as we were getting the studio off the ground and looking at this and saying, this is the best. It will just never be this great again, because this is so perfect. This is like everybody I'd ever want to work with, all in one room, all excited. And it was so perfect that I knew it could never last. And then it didn't.
Perfect.
But it was the right people and it was the right time, and we had the right level of freedom, and we were working on shows that we were really excited about, and everyone was just super excited. And there were no duds in the crowd, nobody like being miserable, everybody was just really excited. We were all like working towards the same thing. Everyone felt good. The studio was about to open. It was just it felt kind of perfect. And I like to work at places where you can have that feeling. And I feel like Cartoon Network it's much more corporate now than it was at that point. And what I've learned about myself is I like to do things that require building. I like to work for companies when they're still figuring things out, or if something's gone so wrong that they need to bring someone in to fix it, like I'm that person. I like to come in and sort of build things from the ground up. And that's why Duolingo reminds me so much of the early days of Nick, because it's still in this building mode. And it's kind of like it's the kind of company I love. There's a very strong visionary at the lead, and he really has an idea of where he wants to go, and he gives us a lot of freedom, but he really has a very clear idea of where he wants things to go. And basically, if you buy into his vision, then you've got a lot of freedom to help carry that out, which is great. And it reminds me a lot of those early days of cable when we had all this freedom, and we were surrounded by other great people, really thinking, okay, how do we do this? And so it was like great minds, lots of freedom, and the ability to sort of to build something, to have a vision, and to be able to communicate it and to build it. And that all felt really great. And I feel like Cartoon Network, they they're just in another phase, and the phase they're in, I think, is how do they fit into this bigger company that they're part of? And they are figuring that out now, and the people who are there are great, so there's no problem. But so much of what I liked about Cartoon Network was that in my mind it was clear what the brand is, and I don't know that in 5 years that brand will still be that brand. It may just be a generic HBO Max Kids or something. It may just be that. And so I feel like Cartoon Network's in good hands, and they don't need me back. I feel like where I am now, what I like about Duolingo is just this idea that like there's a big theory in sort of the academic side, the theoretical side of animation, and it's basically talking about how pervasive animation is. Animation is a pervasive medium. You see animation virtually everywhere now. It's not just cartoons. You see animation like wherever you look, wherever you go. You put on a meditation app and there's animation there. So I like that I'm working on animation that's going to show up in the app that you're using to learn Spanish or French or whatever, or that actually across the and across the world, most people are using it to learn English. So, I'm working on the stories, and I'm working on shorts with those characters who are in the stories, and also working on, figuring out what to do with all the characters and all the different kinds of things you can do. And it's a lot of fun, but it's also figuring out, where can you use animation here? And there's something so much fun about figuring things out, and then, calling people in and saying, hey, can you help? When I got to Duolingo, one of the first people I met was Eric Kaplan. And he was, I don't know if he talked about that at all, but he was essentially like story. He was like a story editing consultant for the team that I work on, and so he was one of the first people I met there, and I was like, wow, getting to work with Eric Kaplan, and he's trying to not to geek out too much, but he's really funny, and so he was helping on the Duolingo stories. So if that gives you some sense of how Duolingo thinks, it's like they're just like, please make these funny, just like, here, these are great characters, have fun, the funnier the better. And so we're of course using them to teach language, so there are some constraints and everything, but really interesting figuring out something new. So like, who wouldn't want to do that? Like, I think the entire animation industry thought I'd lost my mind when I said I was going to Duolingo. But there was a reason there, and it was sort of like working under this theory that animation is pervasive. It's like, how cool would it be to see animation in places you didn't expect to see it? So I always wanted a job that was like, sort of not the place you'd think I'd go. And so I kept thinking, well, whatever I do next, it hasn't been invented yet. And then when I got the call about this job, it actually was, I was like, that's the job. It's been invented, and this sounds cool. And so that's really what I like doing, is sort of, all new things. So if someone's starting up a new channel, I would do that.
Cartoon
that
Plus, is that what you're saying?
It won't be that, though. It wouldn't be that. But another thing that I have to say is, when I got into cartoons, there weren't that many that were good, and now there's so many, so many cartoons out there, and it's like the part of my brain that wants to do things first just keeps saying, well, what else can you do with animation? What else would be interesting? What else would surprise people? What else would be different? And that's what I like figuring out. I like sort of figuring out what's next and where's it going to be. And so I don't feel any big pull. I think if I felt like Cartoon Network needed me, that would be different. But I feel like they've got good people there, and I don't know what I could add at this point. I feel like it's it's doing fine. So
We'll see.
yeah,
5 years
see.
from now, we'll see.
Right. Well, that's true. If it's not around in 5 years, we'll know they didn't do a very good job.
No, and then they should have put Linda's bat signal in the air a lot sooner. So, so what I've noticed is we just need Cartoon Network. We need Duolingo to get it off, and then you can get it. You build it up to the height you can get it to, and then Cartoon Network's going to call because they're floundering. This is all of what I'm getting from this in this hypothetical situation. They're going to put a Linda signal in the air, and then Linda is going to come and save the day.
Well, here's a funny story, is that when Tim Shea was talking to me about this job, he said, like, what I really imagine, like, I don't know, 5 years from now is like, we'll either be like a Sesame Street for adults, or we'll be like a Cartoon Network for people who want to make cartoons about the topics that we're teaching. And I was like, oh, magic words, it's just making me want to do this even more. And I don't think he was really thinking about like me and the sort of things I'd respond to. I think he was just thinking out loud about what his vision was.
Yeah.
And it just happened to be like, the magic words that, I needed to hear. And I was already excited about the job. And when he said that, I was like, oh, thank God. But, so that's like, anytime anyone says it's the Cartoon Network of this or that, it's like, that works for me. But, I'm not feeling any pull to, do something I've done before. And, I look at TV now, and I think, TV at this point, it's just, it's just another screen. So you really can't think about, like, you just have to think about, is it in a place where people will actually know about it and find it and get to see it. And that's, that's really the only important thing now. But I do wonder a lot about branding and about, all those brands that were so carefully built over a few decades of cable. What happens to them all? Like, does Nickelodeon just become Paramount Plus Kids? Like, or does the Nick name mean something? Disney's fine. They just called everything Disney and they're still Disney. So, they're set.
They've
But
got they got money for a little while.
yeah, they're good. But everybody else, it's like, do those brands mean anything? And we'll know in 5 years, right? But I feel like kids may not be paying a lot of attention to where they watch things either. Like when I was a kid, we watched Saturday morning cartoons. I couldn't tell you what channel anything was on. When I think back to it, I remember the cartoons. I don't remember which channels they were on because it was ABC, NBC, CBS. I mean, I remember what was on PBS, but like everything else just all blended together. And so I feel like, for kids now, they just have to be able to find it. And, do they understand the difference between Netflix and Paramount Plus and Peacock? I don't know. Are there big differences? They're just going to look for the shows they want to watch, and that's that. So I know that's all probably pretty strange sounding, but
no, not at all. You want to hear something really sad and pathetic? I can tell you the channel from channel 3 all the way to channel 73 from when I was a kid. It is,
oh yeah,
it is fucking disgusting. 34 was Nickelodeon and 35 was Disney and 36 was Cartoon Network. Those were the 3 channels I watched the most.
well, that makes sense that you would know that, because they were distinct channels, and that makes perfect sense.
But my brain works for very stupid shit. Like if my brain worked for math and science and language, I'd probably be in a mansion right now, not surrounded by Ninja Turtle shit and Cartoon Network stuff. My brain works for fucking stupid movie quotes, cartoons that I absolutely love, sports statistics before 2008. So from like 96 to 2008 for the NBA, I can damn near tell you, even past that, I can tell you who won every championship every year. But it is disgusting on how much useless knowledge that I have up here that benefits nobody besides me. I can, like I said, I can sit there and I can tell you pretty much the block on what shows came on when. And it's funny living in Orlando, and when you were talking about this dystopian future that is void of Cartoon Network 5 years from now, the first thing that came to mind was the Nickelodeon studios. My first introduction to animation was, I don't know if I told you the story. I know I've told the story a few times on there, but it was through SpongeBob, right? When I had Dave Cunningham, he's the showrunner over at the Patrick Star Show. He did Camp Coral. He worked on SpongeBob for quite some time. So I told him this story as well. Whenever we were walking through Universal, they were handing out tickets. They were getting ready to roll out SpongeBob back in the mid 90s, early 90s. I think SpongeBob came out in 99, before the turn of the century. So they were still doing some animation out in Orlando. They were starting to close down the Orlando studios, but they were still doing a little bit, and they were doing this little bit of tour. And if you've been out to Universal Studios Orlando, now it's where the Jimmy Fallon ride is. That's where I believe that's where this ride is, or where the thing was for the animation studios. So we're walking around, they're handing out tickets. They said, hey, come by. We're going to roll out this new show, this new cartoon in a year or two. But we want to show everybody it. So I'm going up there and I'm balls deep in animation. I loved it. I want to be an animator. I want to draw. I love drawing. And then I see this little lone artist over there. We're doing the tour and we're looking down into where the artist alley, artist room, whatever it's called. And the guy keeps drawing stuff, ripping it down and throwing it over. And there's a pile of just balled up pieces of paper on the ground next to his trash can. And I go and I remember asking the lady, I was like, why is he throwing those down? They look like perfectly good drawings. He was like, well, if it's not on model, it's not on spec, he has to start over. It has to be a specific way because the creator, the showrunners, and all these other people, they have a certain way of doing it. If it doesn't match, he has to start over. And I remember in that point in time, I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, whatever I am, snap. I will never do this at all, because all of my drawings my mom thought was really, really good, and she would hang them on the refrigerator. So I didn't understand that they would just throw them away. I didn't understand you have to throw away 10,000 drawings before you really get to master a craft, because this is craft, right? So looking at what Nickelodeon Studios used to be, and I drive by it almost once or twice a month now. When we had tickets for Universal, we would go every weekend. We would go at least one day, and we'd spend it down there. Past the old Nickelodeon, the studios, but the hotel, and it looks like what adults look like now, devoid of color and happiness. That's what the Nickelodeon hotels look like now. Just muted colors. It doesn't have the bright orange and the greens. Everything that made Nickelodeon fun for the hotel and the studios and all that stuff is completely gone. It literally looks like it grew up and got a real job as a hotel. It's it's horrible. And when you were talking about that, the first thing I think I was like, fuck, there's going to be no more black and I don't think there's any more black and white checkerboard Cartoon Network. I think they completely changed the logo. But it's like, it's
Didn't
gonna
they just reverse like which letters were white on black and which ones were black on white? I think that was the newest interpretation of the logo, was they just swapped the old logo.
This was the best logo. I loved what they did with it. Whenever a show would come on, you'd have the characters playing with it. Yeah, I'm not really. Oh yeah, it's a big C, a big N, and then it says Cartoon Network underneath it. So the cartoon for the C is a white letter, and then it's a block black N with a white outline, and it says Cartoon Network underneath it. It's, like I said, it looks like it grew up and got a real job.
Yeah, well, the original Cartoon Network logo had, it was the white on black. So if it's black on white now, then that would have been considered a no, it's okay. So it's about the same as it had. Yeah.
They go
so I don't know. It's not radically different, but that's okay. I think that, it's tough being like running a channel these days, because you're trying to stand out in a world where kids aren't watching channels anymore. They're just going wherever they can stream, which makes sense. But it's like, watching streaming is different from watching TV, and you choose what you want to watch at any time. So, what happened to you, what happened to me when we'd sit down and watch TV. So you watched what was on sometimes, and you watch what was in between two things you wanted to watch just because of inertia. And now you don't have to do that. Now you can watch, all the episodes of a show, and then you move on to the next thing, and you don't have to watch reruns anymore unless you choose to.
Yeah.
And it's a very different viewing experience. And, chances are, you're watching some TV, and then you're going off and playing games. And so it's a very different world that kids are growing up in. So the viewing experience is not the same, and we can't force what worked for us on kids now, because they're living in a different universe.
Yes.
And so it just keeps getting weirder and weirder. And and I teach 3 different courses, and I teach a different one, and I sort of go through, like, one year I teach one, next year I teach the next one, then I teach the third one, then I go back to the first one, and I update my course. So the notes are always like 3 years behind, and I'll look at like the last couple of classes when I'm sort of predicting for the future, and I always think, oh, so cute. And then I go and I update it. And so yeah, so the industry is changing pretty quickly now. And the good news is cartoons are still huge.
Yes.
Cartoons are still a big part of a viewing diet. And it seems like there's still a need for good cartoons. So there's still some interesting stuff that's being made. So that's good. Are there going to be shows that fall through the cracks because they're just too many? Yeah, if numbers stay consistent, then yes, they're going to continue to be things that we just don't even hear about or see. So there's that. But it's not bad for animation. If anything, animation during COVID survived. People were able to keep animation going more than live action. So, animation, stayed on track. That was good. Everyone's continuing with their studios. I guess the question is, who will be making the unusual and quirky shows? Where will they come from? There still will be them, but where will they come from? So that we have to see, what happens. Hard to know.
There's a lot of good places to work.
Yeah, yeah, if you want to work in the industry, there are a lot of good places to work. And I think that it is easy to get sentimental about like a Cartoon Network or whatever, but you look at sort of the ease that you can watch a lot of different things with now, and it's like, and how many things there are. People now who are kids are going to look back at this and be like, well, that was the best. Yeah. So at least there's that, at least people haven't given up on animation, because that was always the worry back in the early 90s, when we were working on the original pilots, we were like, wow, if we get this right, it's good for animation. If we get this wrong, it's really bad for animation. And it's like, that's a lot of pressure. And when people ask me about the 90s, I always say, well, there was a lot of yelling. Everybody yelled at each other a lot. And it's like, we were under a lot of pressure. The fate of animation was in our hands, or at least that's how we saw it. We believed we had the fate of animation in our hands, and that if we messed it up, it was going to be a very sad thing. And the good news is we didn't mess it up.
No.
So the industry now, it's great. It's big. It's, there have been lots of innovations. I think people have gotten better at storytelling. Maybe they're funnier. Like I look at certain shows now and I think, wow, it's like We Bare Bears. I really like We Bare Bears. So I always think, they might not have let me make that when I was there. They might have said, these characters are too cute. You can't make them. And, or that character speaking Korean and there's no subtitles. You can't do that. And now they can. And so I always think, wow, that's really cool that they get to, that they get to do that. That's the show that, and there's several shows like that where I think, wow, that's very cool. So I feel like at least there's that, at least there still are things I'm a little bit jealous of. Bluey, I feel like when Bluey came along, that's like, I felt like I don't need to work in preschool anymore. The best show's been made. So I can move on.
That's good to have that kind of attitude and that kind of foresight. But like I said, you guys laid the foundation for what comes next. I mean, now I know you said you weren't there for very long with Foster's. However, since we've been talking about change in the industry, I do want to bring up one thing and see if you've noticed it as well before we get on to Foster's. When you're saying like the kids are just going to find it, they don't care if they don't have the same brand loyalty. Like growing up, you were a Cartoon Network kid or you're a Nickelodeon kid. Most of the time Disney was either or. You'd watch some Disney shows. For the most part, you stuck around for the movies. So it was orange or a black and white checker kid, depending on what you picked.
Right.
Now, with the way animation and just shows are in general, is streaming services. Most people watch them online. Everybody's got an app to watch something. But what I've noticed is, especially with this younger generation, I have a 12-year-old has done two things, right? It's tapped me into what I used to think was cool that I know is not cool, because on a consistent basis, he tells me whatever I do and whatever I watch is not cool. It's not what the kids are doing. So it's like that consistent tap to mortality. You're like, oh man, you're passing me by here type of thing. But it's also seeing what he likes and what the kids like. And what I've noticed is there's such a huge influx in not so much animation that I grew up with, but anime.
Anime, yeah. Well? I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, it's anime goes in waves. Also, it depends on what's coming out in anime, and it's and what's available to people who don't speak Japanese, like what you can get in English. And there's so much you can get right now.
Mhm.
It's like I think of my students from 10 years ago, and they were obsessed with anime. And I had a class filled with anime fanatics, to the point where the day we got to anime, I said, okay, I'm just going to step back and I'm going to let all of you talk about your favorite anime. And they were psyched, and they talked, they filled 3 hours with,
Yeah.
what anime they liked. And then it kind of quieted down a bit. Like for a while, people weren't watching as much, and now it's back. And I think it has a lot to do with accessibility. There are, a lot of opportunities to watch it, and there are a lot of opportunities to watch it in, fairly, either well subtitled or well dubbed
Mhm.
English. And, it's all available. It's all there. And I think, I think that has a lot to do with it. And, it's different. And I have noticed that a lot of my students watch it. I've, both of my kids went through an anime phase. Um, a lot of kids are going through that. And so I think that's, I mean, you could call it like a fourth or fifth wave of anime, but I think there's always been that. There was a wave of it when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
Speed Racer and Gigantor and Kimba and all of those. There just is something appealing about it, and sometimes it's just the storytelling is so different,
Mhm.
but so cute. And I think and big ideas, and it's a lot of appealing stuff. So I get it. And I think uh you know I think that it's just a cycle. It's like you go through cycles where there's a huge Pixar movie, there's a huge Disney movie, there's a big Nick show, there's anime, and then you start again. And and it's just sort of you know so but I was thinking that too, that anime is big right now, thanks to things like Crunchyroll and other services like that. And a lot of people are watching it, adults are watching it. And a lot of references at work, when we're talking about things, people will make a lot of Marvel references and a lot of anime references.
Yeah.
And I would say 5 years ago, you weren't hearing a lot about either Marvel or, I mean, there was always Marvel, but right now there's so much Marvel that's
Mhm.
out there that, anything you need, you can find a reference to it,
Yes.
so or a version of Spider-Man. That you can refer to,
Oh, 100%.
so yeah, so I think that makes sense. What else is your son watching? Like, what else is
That's
he in?
that's pretty much it. We'll watch anime together. Like I started to get him onto the shows I watched, and
Mhm.
then he just has, I don't want to say he has no life, because most 12-year-olds don't have a life, but he has no life. I'm damn near working 10 and a half, 12 hours before travel on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis. So my consumption is generally limited to a couple hours a week, and then most
Mhm.
of the time I don't even watch my shows anymore. I've got them recorded. I'll watch them when
Yeah.
I get to them, but now I just watch. Like
Mhm.
we're watching an anime now called Attack on Titan. I don't know if you've seen this.
No, I
Uh,
haven't seen that one.
so it is phenomenal. It's essentially this, think of like castles in medieval time. However, they have some kind of technological capabilities, and there's these things called titans that come in and they feed on the humans. They built up these castle walls, and there's just these behemoths, these monsters come in and just destroy everything. And it's
Mhm.
them versus these titans, and they're trying to figure out how to survive. It's a weird concept, but it is a phenomenal show. We're on like season 3. The other one is My Hero, which is essentially Marvel. If you like Marvel movies, it's this, but in the Japanese form. It's phenomenal. But yeah, he tends to stick with a lot of anime because that's what all of his friends are watching.
Right.
I noticed a huge uptick in his anime consumption compared to regular cartoons during the pandemic. Because
Oh
during
yeah.
the pandemic,
Yeah.
when they put a whole bunch, and I think it started with Naruto, um,
Mhm.
And I've heard a lot of the voice actors say like my lines were okay. And then he was like, post-pandemic, he was like, we thought it was a little bit of a bump because everybody just wanted to get out. And then I start seeing kids that are 12 and 13 and younger coming up to me, and this show's been off the air since before they were born. So he's like, I didn't know what happened. And then I was like, he was like, how'd you find out about the show? Or how do you know this character? Is it your dad? Is it your mom? He's like, some of them would say, yeah, my dad watched it, or my mom watched it with me. But most of them were coming up and saying, no, Netflix. I saw your show on Netflix. And then he was like,
yeah.
on Netflix. They're like, well, it came on during the pandemic. So that's all we had to watch. Was we started with Naruto, and then Naruto went to this, and then went to this, and went to this. And then like when I talk to my son, because I try to see, if I plug into him, I know where I need to go as far as, where to get seen, where to get heard. So I'm like, what are you guys watching? He was like, anime. And I was like, well, what anime? And he was like, all of them. And I was like, Jesus Christ with this kid. All right, which one? So I know what to talk to you about. And he was like, oh, we watched this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then the best thing you can do to get your kid to talk is to talk to them about stuff they like. The worst thing you can do is talk to your kids about the stuff that they like, because they just won't shut the hell up. I love my son, but Jesus, he'll go on and on and on. He's like, Dad, you still listening? I'm like, buddy, I'm gonna be real honest. I checked out about 37 minutes ago when you started talking about these different fighting styles with these two different guys. I tried to watch the show with you. I couldn't get into it. It's just not my thing. So, but we've found like certain things. So he'll pick a show and then we'll watch it, and then I'll pick a show and then we'll watch it, and then we just go back and forth that way. We're not all consuming what Dad wants to watch. We're not all consuming what Hayden wants to watch. And then I don't want to say I'm forcing him to broaden his horizons, but most kids won't go out and try broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, shit like that, unless you force them to try it. And it's the same thing with content. They only want to watch what their friends are watching. But
yeah. So how does a 12-year-old react to the old cartoons? Like, do they look old?
That's the first thing he says. He just looks at me. Like whenever I turn on like the TV and I put on the cable box, he was like, Dad, do we have to watch cable? And I was like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with cable? And he was like, there's commercials. And I was like, you watch commercials on Hulu? I was like, I had to watch commercials. I recorded this on a VHS. And he was like, what's a VHS? I'm like, shut up, not right now.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, he'll put it on and he'll watch certain things. Like what was he just watching? Oh shit. It was he's been really hooked, and it's more of an anime inspired show, but the Teen Titans Go.
Oh yeah.
Technically counts because it's inspired by the chibi style of anime. So he's watched that, and he's watched that series like fucking 4 or 5 times. But he's in this weird in between stage where he'll watch like live action type of stuff. Like he loves, like he's a little karate kid. So he's got his brown belt in Kempo karate. So he's watched a lot of Cobra Kai. A lot of the kung fu movies that I used to watch as a kid. We watch a lot of those. So he watches some really interesting stuff, like anything that's on Disney Plus. He watches anything that's on Netflix. But like I said, his main diet is generally anime with sprinkled in old shows that we used to watch. Like he just goes through phases where he'll put something on that he's seen 4 times and he'll watch it again. I'm like, watching this one again? He was like, yeah, it's really good. I was like, yeah, man, it was good like 4 times ago. Now it's not so good. He was like, no, it just gets better. So it's weird, his watching habits. So
well, they're different than ours were, but we watch the same things over and over again, just not willingly. We watch them because that's what we were fed.
Yeah.
And he's got full power to not watch them, and he's still opting to watch them. But I remember my kids every now and then would discover an older cartoon and they'd get really into it. Like they discovered Courage the Cowardly Dog, and they years after it ran the first time, and they got really into that. And Futurama, they got really into Futurama at one point, and they watched all of those. And a couple things like that where like it was just years after it had come out and they were just discovering it. And I thought, that's good. I worked on that. I remember at one point I was talking to my son, and he said it was right when the new season of Samurai Jack was premiering, the recent one. And he was going over to a friend's house, and he said, so we were watching an old one and we let the credits run, and I saw your name. So you worked on that? And I said, yeah, I worked on like the first 52. And he said, oh, that's really cool. I like that show. And I said, I've been waiting for this moment. And I ran upstairs and I grabbed a Samurai Jack t-shirt that I did want to give him at some point. And I was like, I've been saving this for you. And he's like, oh, cool. And he puts it on and he's like, yeah, we're going to go watch the new episodes at Dean's house. And he goes off in his Samurai Jack t-shirt. And I was very pleased with that. And, so I was, I was like, that's really good that you went back and you watched the old episodes. That's cool. What'd you think? And he's like, oh yeah, it's cool. And so I remember feeling like, okay, that's good. It's like we're connecting over this, and that's good. Because I would show my kids, like at one point, I showed them like some Doug and some Ren and Stimpy, and they were like, these seem old, and and I was like, yeah, I guess they are old by your standards. They're old. What can you do? So that was a little like, I didn't know what to make of that. So I never really pushed them to watch anything that they weren't in the mood to watch, but they did go back and watch all of the Powerpuff, and they went through a Dexter phase, and I never told them about Ren and Stimpy. I didn't want to have to explain that to them. So
I got so much heat from that the last time you were on, because Ren and Stimpy is one of those shows. I've brought this up because there's at least once a month that I'll get a message that somebody will go back and watch the first episode we did together, and then you bring up Ren and Stimpy, and I was like, I fucking hated it, quote unquote, I fucking hated that show growing up. And then I've went back since and watched it, because there were so many, like I said, I just hate shitting on things. I try to be as objective as possible. I try not to put anything out there because I don't want to negatively influence something and then somebody doesn't watch it, because there's so many people that will go out there and they'll read a review on something and I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to watch this because one person said it was horrible. I hear this so often. Like I said, I just try to stay away from it. So I went back, and like I said, it wasn't for me growing up because it was definitely aimed at that teenage level. When I was watching, I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, somewhere around there. I didn't understand 98% of the stuff.
Yeah.
Go back and rewatch it. I still don't understand quite a bit of the stuff, but I could appreciate it for what it is. And there was some funny stuff in there. And it all got turned around when I had Billy West on. I went back and watched his episode, and I watched your episode, and just hearing him talk about it, and then hearing the way other people looked at it, and just dropping all preconceived notions, leaving the ego type of thing at the door. And I had to what's the word, imbibe in a lot of THC. So I smoked quite a few joints, and I was like, you know what, let me just sit back, let me just completely let go of whatever preconceived notion I had on this show. And I put it on, and I gotta say, I laughed quite a bit at the show. It was pretty good. I mean, I don't know what, looking back on something when you're younger, you're just like, nah, I just didn't like that. It was the same thing as a kid saying, I just don't like Brussels sprouts, right? I keep bringing up Brussels.
Yeah.
But it's just like, man, I didn't like that. And you go back and you retry it, and you're like, wow, there was a lot of good stuff in here that I just completely wrote off because maybe I had a bad day when I saw something. So ever since, like I said, I get at least one comment a month, maybe once every other month now, because I haven't shit on anything. But whenever Ren and Stimpy comes up, that one was for quite some time after your episode, whether it was on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, somebody was like, man, you should really just lay off of Ren and Stimpy. It's not bad, it's pretty good. And I went back and rewatched. I'm like, yeah, man, you guys were right, I was wrong, I'll take that one on the thing. My bad. So I can appreciate it now, looking back 30 years now. So
a lot of my students over the years have said their parents wouldn't allow them to watch Ren and Stimpy. And a lot of students that I have now, they'll tell me, oh yeah, my parents didn't let me watch Cartoon Network.
What?
Yeah. And I'm like,
they should be arrested for child abuse.
Well, I think, Cartoon Network always seemed a little edgier than everyone else. And it really wasn't. And, I think a lot of people thought things like Ed, and Eddy were edgier because of the way they looked. But at the heart of it, the stories were really, they were just about friendship.
Yes, kids growing up.
Yeah, they were sort of real. So I don't know. I think people are fussy, but the only things I didn't let my kids watch when they were little were things that sounded annoying. Like if they had high squeaky voices, I hated that. So those were the shows I'd say turn that off. It's making me crazy. But yeah, I think I think that if you really aren't paying attention to the shows and you're just like looking at the TV and it looks chaotic, you might think, yeah, I don't want my kids watching that. So I don't know, but I'm always surprised when people tell me they didn't watch Cartoon Network growing up because their parents wouldn't let them. Usually it's their moms wouldn't let them.
Yeah, like there was
That's
two shows that
okay.
were off limits. Three, technically, because I wasn't allowed to. Once they saw
Mhm.
Rugrats because of Angelica, and then I have Cheryl,
Oh, yeah.
which is the
Mhm.
voice of Angelica, and she couldn't. I
Mhm.
don't know if you've ever gotten a chance to meet her.
Oh, sure. I know Cheryl well. She's
She is
great.
one of the
Yeah.
sweetest people I have
Uh-huh.
ever gotten a chance to talk to.
Yeah. And at the time she was a little uncomfortable with some of the lines she had
Yeah.
to read. I remember her telling me that. But I remember we all felt like, well, there are kids just like Angelica. And,
Yes.
we never positioned her as a role model. We always positioned her as, she'd get her comeuppance at the
Yeah.
end. So
100%.
yeah,
Everybody needs a bad person. Everybody needs somebody to war against. That's what makes a
right.
story a story.
Right.
And that's what makes a villain. And she's not really a villain in a
Mm,
sense. It's just she's a kid and they're doing baby things. Like a kid
right.
doesn't
Yeah.
know if the first time they hit you with the remote, because that's what we're going through now with the baby. He's just grabbing stuff and
Oh,
he's
yeah.
tapping. He's not hitting hard. He's just tapping. And you tell him, no, that hurts. No, don't
Yeah.
do that. You don't want to. So it's a learned type of thing. It's the same
Uh,
thing with Angelica. She's just trying. I mean, she was pretty vindictive a lot of times, but nonetheless, man, Cheryl was just such a kind person. The other one was The
yes.
Simpsons. I couldn't
Yes.
watch The Simpsons because of Bart Simpson. My mom
Oh,
would say, I will not have a son that acts like Bart Simpson. So that one
uh-huh.
was out. And then Rocko's Modern Life, of all things, I was not allowed to watch because the
Yeah, I
episode.
get that.
Well, the one
Yeah.
episode she saw, and my older sister Shelly ratted me out. It was he was in the mall. I can't remember what the episode was, but the not it was one of the side characters, somebody that ran the store, was digging in his nose, and then he
Yeah.
either flicked it or he ate it or some shit like that. My sister goes, "Hey mom, look at what Julian's watching." She comes in and she sees me, just stupid shit. She's like, "Nope, absolutely not, no mas." So
Yeah. Rocco was filled with things that people still ask me about. And it's like, the problem at that point was that, they were making Rocco at the height of Ren and Stimpy.
mhm.
Like the Ren and Stimpy magic had exploded. And like by 1992, everybody in the animation industry had serious Ren and Stimpy envy.
Yeah,
And so this is the new show that's being made by the people who made Ren and Stimpy. So basically, if we let Ren and Stimpy do it, we had to let Rocco do it. And they wanted to do everything,
yeah.
they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And we all just kind of felt like, well, okay, you can do that. You can do that, because we would have said yes to that in Ren and Stimpy. So yes, you can do that. And they just pushed.
Mhm.
And there were real moments of brilliance in Rocco, and then there were other very disgusting moments,
Yeah, there's some
and
duds.
you know intentional disgusting moments. But a lot of the people who worked on Rocco went on to do great things. So it was like it had its pluses, but I could see why your mom might have said no to that. There were some moments in it where, you know, I understand. I mean, I worked on it, but I understand.
No problem at all. All right, so we're almost at the 2 hour mark. So what I have noticed here is we've touched a little bit on fosters, but I don't want to keep you. I didn't want to keep you for 2 hours because I'm pretty sure you got some important shit you got to be doing about an hour ago. So if you would like to, we can come back on and we can do another part to this one. We can just talk fosters and we can wrap that up. And then what I can do is I can either put that on the end or just release it in 2 episodes. So if you'd like to, I can have you come back on
We
and we
can
can.
keep talking. I'm
Oh, you
good.
sure?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I'm good.
All right. So getting to fosters, and like I said, I know you don't have too much time on the show, but what do you remember from the early stages of foster?
Well, what I remember, I talked a little bit early on about, the very early pitches of Foster's, and Craig sort of, figuring it out as he like kept pitching it. Um, it he didn't, like it was pretty easy for him to get there with the show, and the show came together. But I remember people kept asking for the logic of it.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of, so do these imaginary creatures eat? Do they go to the bathroom? How does it work? How do you imagine one? And where does it come from? And so there was a lot of explaining. Craig constantly had to explain.
Mhm.
And there was no other show that sort of played with logic in the same way. And because of that, there was a lot of like people just asking questions over and over and over. So I remember a lot of that. And I talked earlier about how, like the head of Cartoon Network at the time was just not quite sure if it was the right direction for us because it didn't look like anything else. And but the thing that really amazed me was how it looked.
Mhm. It was
I mean,
very beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, it had such an amazing look. And there was so much time being spent on the character design, and there was so much imagination going on, and the backgrounds.
Mhm.
I think Craig Kelman was involved with it, and just a lot of hard work went into it, and it really was pretty amazing. I mean, Craig was coming off of Powerpuff Girls, so he had this team. The other thing I remember was he said something that shocked me, which was he said, "I think I'd like to do the show in Flash." And Flash was like, I don't think there were any shows being done in Flash at that point. And I was like, really? You don't have to, but you want to?
Is this the
And he
early days
said,
of Flash?
yeah. And he said, my gripe about the studios in Korea is how much trouble they have keeping things on model.
Mhm.
I really want these shows to be on model. I want these characters, these characters are kind of unusual looking. It's more likely that they'll be able to stay on model if we use Flash. And so, Brian Miller, who was running the studio at the time, he went out and found, I guess it was it Boulder Media that worked with them, or I can't remember now, but he found a studio to help, and they basically did it in Flash, and that was really unusual at the time. I mean, now, there we can look back and see lots of shows done, now there's so many different computer programs people use, but it's not a big deal. But so that was one of the early shows that was done in Flash, and it was Craig's decision to do that, and it ended up still looking really good, I thought.
Yeah.
And so that was good. And I think it was because there were so many questions, it was a little harder for the writers to write. But the like I remember Craig like really figuring out like what angles would work best with these characters, and just all the things he had to figure out that were so different from Powerpuff. So I remember just a lot of shifting. It wasn't just like another Powerpuff. It was really very much its own thing.
Oh yeah.
But I remember feeling pretty excited about it and thinking that it was coming together really well. And feeling a little bit bad when I left that, I was sort of leaving it because it was a fun show to work on. But I still have the toys all over the place. I've got this one right here, and I've got, here's Wilt. So I have the rest of them in another room. So, they're all all over the place in my house because I like that show. But I think it was, it was hard for Craig after having a relatively not easy time with Powerpuff, but it went pretty smoothly. And I think he had to answer a lot of questions for Foster's Home, which when you see it now, it seems like a pretty straightforward show, right? So it's hard to believe how many logic questions he had to answer. But I think that's a typical thing when you really create like a new kind of world. You have a lot of explaining to do to all the people who are going to be working with the show who don't really understand it. So that is something that I remember from the very early days of Foster's Home. And I think I think they did a good job with it. I always enjoyed watching it. I watched it, just as a fan after I left. So I think it went well. But yeah, it wasn't easy. There was a lot of explaining how imaginary friends come to be and what happens when they go away, and all that.
It's a very sad, the concept in itself is very, very sad. Mike, did you what was it? Inside Out. Did you see that one?
Yeah, sure.
So I draw the two correlations just with, was it Bing Bong and
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of similarities. You're right.
That thing tears my heart out every time I see it. And then you think about what he was doing. Like you hear the concept is where imaginary friends go when their kids no longer need them. So when you hear that, you're like, oh man, this is going to be heavy. This is a story about kids growing up. And when Craig was on and he was talking about it, I can't remember the exact terms he used for it. But he said the same thing you had just said. Every time he does something, it's never the same. It's a lot like you. It's never the same. You don't want to do the same thing. You want to do something new because it's challenging, right? It's something different to come on to something, and it's got a formula. Nothing wrong with Disney and Pixar. So any fans out there, don't take it the wrong way. But Disney and Pixar, they have a formula. They know what works. As long as they can get the heart, they know where to go from there. And that's what Disney movies and Pixar movies are about. They're about finding the heart and soul in a character and making you feel for them. Without that, there's no direction in a movie. There's no direction in a TV show. You have to feel for these characters. And then with this one, he was like, I want to do something new. So he was like, this was my artsy. He was, because I was like, and this is very early on when I'm still really early on in the animation, just trying to remember and trying to understand and trying to get as much information on the history of animation in my brain. But I was like, I really felt like this was something like a love letter to UPA, because I love their style, their backgrounds, their color palettes, their color choices. In my opinion, as far as classic animation goes, that studio and Jay Ward Studio, they were on to something. I don't know. I don't have the correct terminology to put whatever it is I've got up here when it comes to those two studios. But those two studios, beautiful is what comes to mind. Like I said, the backgrounds, the lines, just everything about them was just so stunning.
Right. Well, they were artists. They were some of the first animation artists who had like modern art backgrounds.
Yes.
And a lot of the people at Jay Ward were people from UPA. So it was, a lot of the same, I think. But guys that, like their training was not necessarily just classical art. They were coming in with, and you think about the era, they were coming in and they were interested in modern art, and they had backgrounds in modern art or in different kinds of art, and they were using it in animation, and they were not trying to create the illusion of life. They were just trying to make, they were going with just like cartoony look and just trying to make it move, just trying to make you believe these characters. They weren't trying to make you think they were real. And so that's, that gave them a lot of leeway to play with the art, and to play with perspective. And if that's your taste, if you respond to that taste, it's true. UPA really was the pinnacle of that look. And, and to me, UPA was really just like, there's before UPA and there's after. And that's how I teach it when I teach animation history. And, you want to talk about studios that no one knows about. Nobody knows about UPA, but then you find out how much impact that they had, just the fact that people at Cal Arts in the 90s were learning about UPA from Mike Giamo and taking what they learned and combining it with their love of Hanna-Barbera. And Dexter came out of that, and Powerpuff came out of that, and Foster came out of that. and to some degree Johnny Bravo came out of that.
Yep.
And they had a lot of impact. And people don't know where that design comes from, but that's where that design comes from.
Yeah,
It
that
comes with wanting to play, take the graphic style that was popular in Europe post-war and make it move. So
that studio, and I'm so glad whenever I can have somebody on here that can tell me stories about UPA. Like I said, I can go and watch any YouTube thing I can do on UPA. You can go and Google search some things, but there's not a lot about them that are out there as far as the UPA goes. Like we were talking about I think we were talking about it before we hit record, but something you want to work on is New York illustration, right? So
yeah.
I literally knew there was nothing. I had a guy on here named Bob Singer. Do you know who Bob Singer is?
I've heard the name, but I'm
Okay,
not.
so he worked on the original Scooby-Doo. He
Oh,
worked on the Flintstones. He worked on a little bit of Hanna-Barbera. I want to say he worked on Johnny Bravo. I could be wrong, but he pretty much got out and he was teaching, I think, character design and a little bit of other things over at CalArts, I believe.
oh, okay.
Bob, I apologize. Man's 94 years old, right? So he's been around for some time, and he had some amazing stories. Got to work with Bill and got to work with Joe.
Yeah.
But he was telling me a little bit of stuff about UPA, and then just going off of what he said. I didn't know why that style spoke to me, but I think it's because of all of the animation. Like Gendy was a huge fan of UPA. Craig was a huge fan of
Yeah.
UPA. And when I had Rob Renzetti, which was one of my favorite people to have on here, such a cool dude. One of my favorite shorts to come out of the What a Cartoon and the Cartoon was Mina and the Count.
Oh,
I
yeah.
absolutely love that. And the first thing I noticed is just the color choices he used for his palette. And then you look at it's when Drac comes out of the castle and he's going into the sorority home or whatever, and you look at the backdrop on the cityscape, and the cityscape is a UPA style. And I asked him, I'm like, I don't want to talk out of turn, and it makes you sound like I'm smarter than I am, Rob, but was UPA huge? And he was like, absolutely was. He was like, that's where this came from, and this is where this inspiration came from. Just put it in here. He's like, I love the studio. Gendy loved the studio. Craig loved the studio. We all love this, and we all learned it in CalArts when we were going to school. Randy was another one. Randy Myers. They brought it up. He was like, all of this style was taught to us. And he was like, when you've got that kind of inspiration, of course it's going to reflect in your art. And I was like, oh, shit, that makes all the sense. That's why I like this, because you guys gave it to me before I saw it originally, or when it was first out there. So I love the style. And then I don't know, I'm pretty sure you've seen it, but 101 Dalmatians.
Sure, yeah. That's one of my favorite of the Disney movies. Yeah.
I've got to say, this one, like I've watched it more times because the baby absolutely loves all the dogs we have. So anytime a dog is on, his eyes light up. So the first thing I started putting on was 101 Dalmatians, and I'd watched the movie, but I hadn't watched the movie in I don't know how long. I remember looking at it and just watching it, how different it was, and I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
This is beautiful. And then I have Floyd Norman on, right? Floyd Norman, one of the hugest Disney animators of all time. And I got to talk to him for 2 hours. Sadly, stuff happened to the audio and video, so I was only able to put out 30 minutes worth of it because the audio and video was so messed up.
Oh gosh.
But we talked 2 hours almost, and just old school animation, his favorite Walt stories, just everything. And then 101 Dalmatians comes up, and he was telling me, just the art style and how Xerox really helped them. Help them make that movie. He's like, without that movie's not getting made, because you're having to all of these dogs. Right. But that movie is so beautiful. And looking at it, like I said, Jungle Book's always been my favorite Disney movie. However, this one is a very, very, very close second. It's such a beautiful movie when it comes down to it. Beautiful movie. And all of it, I think, is UPA inspired. So.
Oh yeah. And it was definitely that era, like it had a more modern look than all of the animation that came before it, and a lot of the animation that came after it too. And it was my favorite. It was the Disney movie I saw in the theater when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And because it was I think Actually, I think I saw it in its second run. I don't think I saw it in its first run, but I think I saw it for its second run. And I remember being at somebody's like eighth birthday party, and
Yeah.
it was for 101 Dalmatians, and I remember saying to the kid next to me as we were watching it, one of the scary moments, I said, "Don't worry, I've seen these kind of movies and they have happy endings." And there's a little 7-year-old film critic.
You're giving them hope.
Yes. But yeah, I think that UPA was a very pivotal studio for a lot of people. And for me, it was when I would see that style, I knew that style was more recent than a lot of the other things that I would see. So like to me, UPA things and things that looked like UPA, because there were a lot of cartoons that came out after that that kind of imitated UPA.
Yeah.
And so I had the sense of, okay, this is my era. These things are cool. The other stuff, to me, something like Snow White seemed like it was hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
It seemed ancient, but and I didn't really know, but I just knew that if it looked like Mr. Magoo, it was much more modern.
So what I've gotten from this, so first is the book on New York illustrators, and the second one is UPA. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's, well, I don't need to write. I wrote one essay for a book on it looked at how John Kay was influenced by Clampett, and it looked at how Gendy was influenced by Bob Cannon from UPA. So I spent a lot of time researching UPA at that point, but I don't think I have anything to add to the UPA story or, to the Cartoon Network story. But I feel like, people really could use a book about the history of New York animation. So if someone else doesn't do it, I may have to.
I think you should, because I think your version is going to be better. And before we get off topic for that essay, is that essay still around? Is it floating out on the internet? Can we read it?
Oh, you know what? I'll send you a copy of it. I have a Xerox of it. So
Beautiful. I'd love to read it. I actually just had on Ruth Clampett. I had on Bob's daughter.
Great.
Yeah, she was such a phenomenal person. It was really cool listening to some of the stories. But as we hit the little over the 2-hour mark, you ready for some fans questions?
Sure.
Beautiful.
Yes.
All right. So usually I write them down, but I was having trouble getting the old hand to work tonight. So I took some pictures of them, since I figure we're talking high tech and we're talking streaming and all that other stuff. Might as well get in with the new age of kids. So we got some really good ones here.
Great.
So I told you the Craig one. I thought that one was a real fun one to start off with at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, I wish I remembered that more.
You'll remember as soon as you get off this call. That's usually how it works.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the ones, it's not a question, but one of the guys that you helped a lot along the way, Joel Dickey, right, from AKA Cartoon Network, Ed, and Eddy, right, the Vancouver studio.
Yeah.
He put Linda ! She was a key element in bringing us the Eds. So he didn't have a question. He just wanted to say, and every time your name came up, whether it was Mike, Jono, Sabrina, Rachel, Joel, Big Jim, it didn't matter, Corey, it did not matter who I talked to. They all dropped Linda's name and said how much of a huge factor she was in keeping Cartoon Network away from AKA and keeping Danny away from all of the crazy shit and just letting Danny do what Danny did. And Danny created a masterpiece. So all of them had such amazing things to say about you.
Well, that's nice. That's good. That was that was all a very positive situation. I don't remember anything bad happening there. I feel like, yes, it was pretty easy to keep things going smoothly there. Danny he was not always terribly interested in timing, but I kind of agreed with that. My attitude was, they don't give Emmys for best on time delivery. No. So
best product.
Yes. 20 years later, the only thing that would matter was it good? And so if he needed extra time to make it good, he should make it good. I still feel that way, and that is why no one ever puts me in charge of production. And I'm
Yeah,
okay with
that's why they haven't had any hit shows since 2009 stand the test of time like Ed and Eddy, as they need another Linda. Oh man, I always butcher their name and I apologize, guys. Cosmic Comics Productions wants to know, as someone pivotal in setting up so many creators and getting so many successful shows running, what advice would she give to a creator today trying to pitch themselves and their ideas to differentiate themselves and stand out / make their way? There are seemingly so many more people in the industry than there were before. What are your thoughts? Thank you in advance. I'm trying not to lose my soul along the way. So what advice can you give to
that.
somebody?
That is a good question, because there's not an easy answer.
Mhm.
Because the obvious answer is, well, you should make your work stand out by not copying anyone else's work, but making, doing, something that is very much your vision, and, not making it someone else's vision. But, how do you stand out? I think what you have to do these days to really like get to make your show is you have to go and work on someone else's show, and you have to distinguish yourself on someone else's show so that the network executives recognize you. And then you have to make a show that is completely different from what you've been working on. Oh, look, my cat's here. Hello. Um, so you have to, you can't just like, show up and make a show. You have to gain the executives' trust. You have to, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I think he made an appearance last one too, so it's a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
callback.
He knows when it's getting exciting around here, and he wants in on it. But yeah, you can't just like pitch and be like, trust me, I know what I'm doing. You have
Yeah.
to go and you have to sort of pay your dues on a show, and really distinguish yourself on a show, and then, be discovered, and then you talk them into giving you enough freedom and making something that really is unique.
Mhm.
And that's pretty hard these days, but it's you just have to, get to the right place where you can do it. I think the thing that I'm suggesting is, putting that extra step in there of going and working on someone else's show and becoming a known quantity while you're there. It's sort of earning the right to do the thing that you want to do. I think it's hard to just, sort of, just go out and pitch if
Mhm.
nobody knows you. I think you have to, people, you're asking people to kind of stake their career on you. They have to know you at least somewhat. So, and it's harder to get to that point now because the industry's so much bigger.
Mhm.
But you do have to think about that. But that would be my suggestion, is really, just sort of like, build your reputation so that people feel that they can trust you. Because
100%.
that's the big thing now, I think, is making sure that people trust you, and then they'll give you that freedom that you want to make the show that you want to make. So
I can't agree more. And if I could add just a little bit to that, it's the same thing as this podcast. I couldn't go out of the gate and get Craig McCracken. Didn't happen. It took having Rob Renzetti on, it took having Linda on, it took having Robert Alvarez on, Randy Myers on. It took having a whole bunch of people. When it came down to it, everybody wants the Rob Paulsons of the world. Everybody wants the Craig McCrackens, the Gendys, the Dannys, the John Dilworths, the Van Partiblays, the insert whatever character or whatever creator you want. Very few people want to hear the storyboards. Very few people want to hear the executives, want to hear the writers and all this other stuff. So with me going through an entire studio's cast, or excuse me, crew, that goes and shows whoever it is that I eventually want on that, oh, he's serious about this, or he
right.
did the diligence. He went out there and talked. It wasn't just me trying to get, because the way I look at it is a lot of people want clickbait. And that's exactly what this podcast will never be. Like, I take clips from this and then I use those as teaser trailers to get people excited for the show. But a lot of people will tune out when we start talking when it comes to certain topics. but there's a select core of people that go here. Hundreds of people will go here and they'll watch this and they'll hear this and they'll take stuff. There's so many people that write in that are autistic, they're on the spectrum, they have Down syndrome. A lot of them, I'm not saying a lot of the animators are on the spectrum, but a lot of animators and writers are white that are in the industry now that are trying to figure out what they can do to separate themselves. So I have a lot of mentally challenged people that listen to this. And I was blown away when I would have people write in and they say, I'm on the autism spectrum. I don't understand anything other than cartoons. He was like, there's something in my brain that I can't understand when somebody is upset with me, but I can understand when a character is upset on the screen. And looking at that message, not understanding that not that everybody thinks like me or everybody thinks the way people think, but that people go through and people have these hurdles and these challenges on regular shit that I'm okay with, right? I can kind of get, like, when I see somebody and they're upset, I can tell they're upset. But there's a certain set of people out there that see this and they learn through cartoons, right? I didn't know that before I started this. And before I started talking to these people, I just figured I can go and ask, hey, you want to be on my show? And they would say yes, right? I assumed that it was the same thing, but it was the same way of me learning that people go through different things, is the same way of learning, like, hey, you have to kind of prove yourself
Right.
through all of this.
Yeah.
You have to have people that because a lot of these people, especially in this industry now, are very, very guarded because it is so easy to get canceled. It is so easy to say the wrong thing, it be taken out of context, and then you can no longer find work. That's why there's so many stories on this show that I've heard that most of the people won't get to hear because I had to cut those stories out. However, it's just keep grinding, get your foot in the door, and then as soon as the foot's in the door, kick it and be undeniable. I can't remember who said that. One of the animators on here, one of the creators on here, is that just get your foot in the door, whether it's a job, like you were just saying, cleanup artist, an in-between guy, backgrounds, get something on there where you can say, hey, I've worked on a show and I have credit. I have talked to this person. I can talk to this person now. Same concept. Get your foot in the door and then become undeniable.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
All right. So the next one here, that was a good question. I apologize. Every time they write in, I always, because I look at their name and I'm like, oh, it's comics. I'm like, oh no, it's cosmic. So I get them mixed up. So I always have to apologize for that one. Mark Grunt 22 wants to know. Of course, shows like Samurai Jack, Courage, and Batman Beyond are better, but they are all well praised, while Eds don't get anywhere near the praise and love that shows like Johnny Bravo, Animaniacs, and Dexter get, despite being a better show than those. For me, it goes like, I think he was just talking about the shows he likes. So he brings in some shows. So I think he just says that Ed and Eddy doesn't get enough love, which I agree. It never gets enough love. What were some of your favorite shows on the network to watch? That's coming from Luis Belcher off of Reddit.
Favorite shows on Cartoon Network?
Yeah, we'll stick with Cartoon Network since we're doing a Cartoon Network show.
So I liked a lot of them because I worked on them. I think, I really enjoyed I enjoyed watching the ones I enjoyed working on the most. I think that's probably not surprising. So I Dexter and Powerpuff were ones that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed working on Samurai Jack because I was learning a lot on that. That was the first action cartoon I'd worked on. So I felt like I was taking a master class in storyboarding when I worked on that show. So that was fun. I liked each show for something. So I don't think I really had like, solid favorites. I feel like, like with Johnny Bravo, I sorry, my dog keeps barking. I'm gonna shut the door. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem at all.
She's very noisy tonight. I don't know what's going on. So I felt like with each show I was learning something. So like with Johnny Bravo, I learned a lot about voice records because I attended a lot of those voice records. They had a lot of celebrities in them, and so I learned a lot about that process with that show. So that was kind of fun. I learned like I said, Samurai Jack was like a master class in boarding. Dexter and Powerpuff were like master classes in boarding as well. I was still learning about really solid gag cartoons at that point. um Ed, Ed and Eddy was, a fun show to work on. Like, I really enjoyed that. I I really enjoyed that, like visiting that show. I spent a lot of time in Vancouver at that studio just because it was really it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot
Mhm.
about what they were thinking about, just being there when people were pitching boards and things like that. So that was fun. And just how Danny interacted with his team and everything. And it was I remember, around 3 o'clock, everyone would, open up a beer. And I remember thinking that was funny at the time. Very Canadian in my mind.
You ever get a post-it note from Danny?
Oh, many, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I've asked so many of the board artists and the writers, because
Mhm.
there's always one, because Dan, for the fans that don't know, that might have not listened to any of the Edit and Eddy ones, which I'm pretty sure you have, because it's a good portion of my episodes where, especially the early episodes, were Edit and Eddy episodes. But Danny would write all of his remarks on post-it notes and he would stick them to the boards. Some of my favorite ones, it was like, "You look like you drew this with your ass." There were other ones that said "no heart, no soul," and he would circle it, or he would give it letter grades. And I
Mhm.
can't remember who said it. It might have been Joel, but I'm pretty sure it was Scott. But I think he had wrote an F on it and circled it a whole bunch, and then gave it back to him. And they didn't know what to fix, so they just redrew the entire thing. But I got to imagine, as far as from your standpoint, you're Danny's boss. I mean, he might not look at it that way. He might have his own opinion. He's a great guy from what I hear. But what
Well, he
was
was very exacting.
yeah,
He knew what he wanted, and he pulled it out of people.
yeah,
That was like a masterclass in boarding too. I mean, he was really big on gags, like in ways that a lot of people could never come close to the way he thought. He had a very expansive vision of what what these gags are going to be like, and there were so many characters in them, right, that you had to like move them all around. And sometimes there could be like 10 characters running around in some situation. And he was pretty definitive about what he wanted. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
he was not sending those notes to me, but I was seeing those notes occasionally, and I
What
was
was your
always like,
favorite one?
wow. Wow. That's and that's part of what you'd get if you were in the studio in Vancouver, is you'd get to watch him critiquing things.
Yeah.
And he could be tough, but he was demanding. And I think everyone I worked with, they were tough in their own ways. So, but yeah, I wouldn't say I had like a particular, favorite of all of the shows. Some shows were easier to work on than others. Some shows came together more easily than others. But and I liked those because they were more fun, they were less stressful. But yeah, I liked a lot of the shows that I worked on. Some of the later shows I didn't get to work on as much. Like,
Mhm.
they would have a different network executive on them, and I might not get to read all the boards, or I might not get to do very much on them. I would I like the more I became an executive, the less I got to just sit and read boards and scripts and outlines. And that's what I really like doing. So
Yeah.
it's like I am one of those people that like, when I get too high up, I have to leave and start again.
Do you have a favorite post-it note you might have seen though from Danny? Do you have one that might?
I don't have any specific ones that I remember. I just remember the tone of them, and it was a
Yeah.
little bit like, like, did you draw this with your foot kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Um,
I've heard some great ones. Like I said, those are some of my favorite people to ever talk to. And not one of them that I had on had anything bad to say about Danny. They all said how demanding he was, yet how you didn't want to let him down because of how much he cared and how much he protected his crew. So if you
right.
did what you were
Mhm.
supposed to do, Danny had your back. And I have to sit there. I
Yeah.
have to say,
Yeah.
there's so many people that will let shit falls downhill, and they will usually
Mhm.
let it pile up, and people will not step up for anybody. So to hear that that still happened, and he would come out of his pocket a lot whenever they were coming up late, you know, that meant something to me, just being a fan, because like I said, you can see the heart and soul in that show, and you see that because it starts with Danny, and Danny only wanted to have what he wanted to have. It was excellence or nothing else. If it was anything
Mhm.
short of excellence, go find a job somewhere else. And I like that mentality. I think that iron
Right.
sharpens iron type
Mhm.
of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so real Nico Laser wants to know, I think, or he just wanted to say thanks for making an awesome childhood. um Crazy about SpongeBob. He or she, excuse me, so I apologize. Please name one of your favorite episodes from some of the classic Cartoon Network shows you had a hand in. Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, Ed, Edd and Eddy, Foster's, etc. Do you have a favorite episode from, you know, maybe a couple of those shows, or one that stands out?
Yeah, I don't really, can't really say that I have particular favorite episodes of things, because I was sort of in the weeds on all of them. So I but there were certain ones that I still like to go back to. Like I like to watch there was a Dexter Speed Racer parody,
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
and I always thought that was like like high hilarity. And uh there were a couple of Powerpuff episodes that I really liked. And of course I'm a Beatles fan, so
Yeah.
Meet the Beatles, that one was a personal favorite. And let's see what else. There were actually some Johnny Bravo. Like I find myself referring to, even though I complained about them at the time, the Johnny Bravo parodies of the Twilight Zone. I have referenced them way more than I should. And let's see, I sometimes it's more like their lines that I remember from certain ones, or just things. But I can't say that I like have favorite episodes that I can still like. Sometimes I'll just go back and I'll like I'll watch like a few of something. But it's more like I'll go back and I'll watch like a pilot or something, and I'll think, wow, I can't believe they let us make this, or something. Like I a few years ago I watched the pilot from Cow and Chicken,
Ooh.
and I was like, wow, what were they thinking? That this has so many things in it that you couldn't do in a show now.
Oh yeah. You
And
couldn't
we
do it
had
a
to
show
take
back
them all
then.
out back then too. And and so 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 yeah, so there are different like shows that had moments that I thought were really funny. And like for some reason I always remember a lot of random moments from I Am Weasel cartoons. I think the early ones I worked on a lot more hands-on, and then the later shows that I worked on, it was like I was a little less involved with the day-to-day on them. Um but yeah, so some of those cartoons. And uh yeah, there's some Dexter ones that I remember really liking. But definitely Mach 5 was one that I really liked. Um, yeah, I'm not giving a very good answer on this, but mostly because it's been so long. It
Yeah, it's hard to
was,
remember back that far, you know?
yeah, yeah, like to remember the names of the episodes. It's like I have all the DVDs sitting here. But um, I had a really funny thing happen to me a few years ago. I was still at PBS at the time, and they send out uh, DVDs, or they used to send out DVDs during like Emmys voting season, so that you would see stuff. And uh, I got a package, and it was supposed to be like a Showtime movie in it. And I open it up, and someone had put a Dexter Ego Trip tape in the box. And I was like, okay, someone knows me. That's good. But there was no note with it or anything. There was nothing in it that said anything. It was just there. And I was like, okay, this is pretty funny. I wish I knew who did it. So if that person's out there, please
Maybe
let me
we
know.
hear this.
It was funny.
Yeah. Um, it's funny you bring up the Speed Racer one, because I talked about that with Craig,
Mhm,
and I can't remember how we get to it or how we got to it. But he was talking about I think it was just the cadence of Mojo Jojo. But
mhm,
him and Rob would go back to their house and then they would watch Speed Racer. I think he said it was on MTV back in the day. And he was like, before it came to the state, or after it came to the States, it was a comedy because of how they cut it and how they dubbed it. It was like it turned
right,
into a comedy. And he was
right.
like, I took that cadence, and that's how Mojo Jojo talked. Mojo Jojo talked how Speed Racer was. And then I
Mhm,
forgot, until you mentioned, I forgot the Speed Racer Dexter's Lab mashup. And I was like, it makes perfect sense. I was like, these guys are taking what they're watching at the time and then being inspired and writing a love letter to that time between UPA,
mhm,
the shows that Craig watched that inspired Mojo Jojo's hat and his headpiece and all this other stuff.
mhm,
And then having David on it, I think I had to talk to David Feast a couple times now,
mhm,
creator of Cow and Chicken, and Dean
mhm.
Taylor. He did
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
he's such a great dude. He's going to come on again soon here.
Oh, cool.
But just hearing all of the stuff that kind of went into how Cow and Chicken got started, and
Mhm.
then how it got developed. They couldn't call the guy, they couldn't call him the devil, but they call him the
Oh,
red guy.
right,
And I was like,
right.
that's what they were
Yeah,
hung up on. They were hung up on the word the devil. This dude was bouncing around on ass cheeks. That's how he walked. And that's
right,
what they were worried about. And I was like, and the pilot, I believe the pilot was no smoking. So it was
right.
picking
Yeah.
smoking
Mhm.
cigarettes on cartoon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, there were so many things in that pilot that could not be in the show. In fact, Turner like started a department of broadcast standards to review that show specifically. They didn't have a broadcast standards department before that.
Way to
And
go,
they
David.
started a whole department just to review that show. And the big, I have a whole file of all the like emails that went back and forth about that show, and some of them are so funny because somewhere along the way they made the determination you just can't show him with his pants off. So every he has a different name in every episode, and it's always along the lines of, Mr. Pantsofsky,
Mhm.
things like that. And they just put that joke in every episode. So yeah, there were a lot of inside jokes in that episode.
Yeah,
So,
I like when they do callbacks, man. I can't find a username 33 wants to know. What was the most intimidating project you were presented?
oh, I think it was when I worked on Justice League.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we had decided we wanted to work with Warner Brothers and Bruce Timm, and
Mhm.
we were pretty excited about that. And then he said, I have an idea for Justice League. And we said, okay. And so then I started getting boards. Well, I started getting scripts, and the scripts were long. And I wasn't used to reading scripts. I mean, we did most of our shows were premise to outline to board. And suddenly I'm getting these, really like, pretty lengthy half-hour scripts. And then, the boards were like super thick, and they were beautiful, and they were elaborate. And other than Samurai Jack, I was sort of new to action. And, I'd been working on the show for, probably about 6 or 7 episodes. And I went to Jay Bastian and I said, hey, I need you to take over on this because I'm just, I'm not enough of an action expert to be the right person to. It's like I can find the standards issues and I can find the character questions, but looking at these boards, I'm not sure I'm finding the action questions. So I'm going to give you this show. And he said, great. And he was very happy after that. And then he went and worked at Warner Brothers after that. So it all worked out. But I was pretty intimidated by that because I was a comedy person and I was not an action person. And no matter how much I liked the characters and appreciated Bruce Timm's work and everybody's work on that show, I was not adding anything to that show. and they didn't need me to, but I just felt like we needed more of a fan to take over. So that's when I handed it over to Jay, and he was very happy and he did a great job. So that worked out perfectly. But I found that a little intimidating. And yeah, everything else, I think I just when I first got to Cartoon Network, I wanted to get along with everyone. I didn't know what that was going to be like. I was coming from Nickelodeon and everything. So I worked really hard at not being a jerk. And so that worked out. It was a good move, good career move. Don't be a jerk. But that wasn't intimidating. I just wanted to get it right. But yeah, Justice League was pretty intimidating. I was scared that I wouldn't know what I was doing. And worked out in the end.
I got to imagine so. I mean, like I said, anybody that has ever worked with you has never had a bad thing to say about you. So
Well, that's good.
you got to be doing something right. And then this is one that I want to start implementing into every show, because of so many shows I've had people that have talked about their inspirations, the people that they drew inspiration from, or they see something they did and they're like, I'm a fan for you for the rest of my life. So this is something that we're going to start with this episode. So from here on in, this question will be in there. But if you had a Mount Rushmore of animators, so you get 4 people plus a honorable mention. So you've got 5 people. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore of animators?
Okay. Cordell Barker is a Canadian film board animator. He did The Cat Came Back. And that was one of those cartoons where like I wasn't working in animation yet when I saw that. And when I saw that, I remember thinking, I'd like to work with that guy. And I would like to, I mean, we ended up not ever really working together, but he was always my sort of like, someday I will get him to work with me. I'd put Craig and Gendy on it.
Okay, good choices.
And Joe Murray.
Rocko.
And Craig Bartlett. Those are Joe and Craig are my sort of like, they're my forever creators. Wherever I go, I try to, like bring them and, work with them again. Cause I've worked with both of them in each of my jobs and they're both really great. And I'm gonna add one more person to that. I'm gonna put Janet Perlman, another Canadian film board animator, on my Mount Rushmore, because whatever she does makes me laugh, and she is she definitely, she's not like, she's not one of those people doing things to confuse you, or she goes right for what's funny, and she always makes me laugh, and she's also a great artist. So I always really like her stuff. So I'd put her on my Mount Rushmore with all of those guys. And I'm sure after we get off the phone, I'll think of 10 more people, but you did limit me. So
well, that's what I like. And that list, for the people that are listening, that list is not to slight anybody that didn't make the cut. So I want people
right there. If I had a bigger Mount Rushmore, I'd put other people on it.
100%.
Yeah, these are the people that I think they were helping me form my taste as I was sort of, figuring out what I liked. And these are people that to this day I will go and watch things that they've done just to laugh. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, it's I know you didn't ask my Mount Rushmore, but I'm gonna tell you my Mount Rushmore.
Oh yeah, tell me your Mount Rushmore.
I want to be a little narcissistic here for a second, Linda. Gendy has always been my guy. Gendy, number one. He is what Bill, or what Barbera and Hanna-Barbera was to everybody that in Gendy's generation. Gendy is to me. And then Craig's up there as well, Craig Bartlett. And here's a little secret. He's coming on in the fall. I can't wait. Craig's coming on in the fall, so
Yeah, great.
he's real busy right now. So we've been in contact, and he's going to come on down the road. And I've got some really cool stuff planned for that one because that show was super huge to me growing up. I don't rescue a pigeon unless I see a Pigeon Man episode from Hey Arnold. That's one of my favorite
Yeah.
episodes of all time. So I can't wait to, I don't know if I have told that story of Paul Germain. I had the Rugrats co-creator on there. I had him on and I told him that story. So Craig Bartlett is up there. Jay Ward, there's not one Rocky and Bullwinkle thing I don't like. I mean, it just, I love
Have you
that.
talked to Daryl Van Sitters?
I had him coming on last year, but I had to reschedule, and then his schedule was crazy and my schedule was crazy. I still have to reach back out and get him on, but I do want him on though.
Because he is he's a good Jay Ward expert.
His book is amazing.
Yes. Yes.
So the last one I read, it was The Moose That Roared. Have you read that one?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so good. So
Yeah.
good. Hearing all of that stuff that they had to go through, from the animation in Mexico to it being brought back to LA, to Jay Ward being damn near killed by a truck and it changing his life forever. It's just like all of these things you hear. It's kind of like this podcast. If I just sit here and so Linda, how'd you get started? Okay. So why'd you do that? All right, Rocko, why'd you go there? Cartoon Network. It's the same concept. So unless you get like a book like that one where it was like all of the shit that you don't hear about, or you get a podcast like this where we just talk,
Right.
you hear some of the stories that you get to hear. So that was another great book. One of my favorite books on animation was that book, The Moose That Roared. And then the last person I had on there for my Mount Rushmore is Jorge Gutierrez. I have never cried more at shows or movies than I have when I've watched The Book of Life, Maya and the Three. If you haven't watched that one yet, that is a beautiful, beautiful show on Netflix that Jorge did this past year. And then Craig McCracken rounds out my honorable mention. He should be up there.
This was my Mount Rushmore of TV people, because if I had a Mount Rushmore for feature people, I put Miyazaki up there. That's another big influence for me, was seeing Totoro sort of early on in my career, and not even being able to, like, I always liked Japanese animation. I was a big Speed Racer fan and a big Tezuka fan, but seeing Miyazaki's work, I still can't completely put my finger on what is it that amazes me so much about him, but something does. And I'm always sort of amazed when I look at his work. So I'd put, if there's an extra, like Mount Rushmore down the street, if you go to if you go to South Dakota and you go to the real Mount Rushmore, there's the other statue of the Native American one, is it Crazy Horse? I can't remember, but if I had one of those, it would be Miyazaki on it. So
we just watched, my son had never seen it before, so we just watched Spirited Away for last week before. I don't know, these weeks are just starting to blend into one another, but we just watched that because he's been on a real anime kick. But Mark Davis is the other guy that I wanted to mention as well. His work is just so beautiful. Just doesn't get enough. I'm pretty sure he does get enough attention. It's just me finding out all these guys' names fucking 10, 20 years down the road. But yeah, he's up there as well. That's been the chat, man. I've really had fun with this one. You said you're still teaching, right?
Yeah, I will be teaching in the fall. I'm not teaching at the moment.
What classes are you going to teach? That way, if there's some people out here that want to take a class from the great Linda Simensky, they can sign up for it.
Well, this is I teach at Penn, so they'd have to be Penn students. But
get that GPA up later.
Yeah, if any of them are Penn students, I will be teaching this fall. I'm teaching the history of Disney animation.
Ooh. So, what eras?
What's that?
What eras are you doing?
Oh, I do the whole thing. I
really?
start with the beginning of Walt, and we go all the way up through. I go a little quickly through the more recent stuff because I'm always operating from the idea that they've seen a lot of the more recent ones. But we look at the merger with Pixar, all of that stuff. So we hit on the whole thing.
And is it just a 9-week course?
14.
I was about to say that's a lot of stuff. Even 14 weeks, that's a lot
Yeah.
of moving.
Yeah, it gets a little harder to teach each time I teach it because they have more films
Yeah,
to
because
to
they
work
add a new
with.
6 movies every
Yeah,
other year.
yeah, yeah. But it's a fun course, and I always enjoy teaching it. So yes, so I will be teaching that, and apparently I'll be writing a book about New York animation. So
Oh man, I can't wait. And I'm pretty sure there's been a few people that I've had on that are writing books or beginning to write books. However, if you go the self-publishing route, you can put it up on Kickstarter, crowdfunding, and all those other different websites. I'm pretty sure the fans, and there's a lot of people in the animation industry that would get behind it as well, and we can kick money towards it. So if that is, you got some downtime in between that 14 weeks seems still way too short to be talking about Disney's animation. That's insane. I got to imagine by the time you're done with that class, you're like, I need a summer vacation for 8 months.
oh yeah, well it takes from January to August to recover, and then I start teaching again.
That's just
It does
wild.
take a long time to catch up. It's
No,
true.
I can imagine. Well, you got to go back and see all those movies and write a new syllabus for all the new movies that came out the year prior.
Yeah, well, it has forced me to watch a couple of Disney movies that I had skipped along the way, like
Yeah.
the one with the Home on the Range. I had not seen. I had to go watch that. So not as bad as I'd expected, but yeah, I do have to occasionally catch up with things I'm behind on. So
Well, at least it forces you to check out something new. It forces you to open up to something you might have just, I'll catch it when it hits Redbox. But now on Disney Plus, you can watch it at your leisure, and you can watch it in peace
right,
if you wanted to. So
yeah,
that makes it a hell of a lot nicer too. Um,
right.
and then, like we talked about a couple times during here, you are working over at Duolingo. So if
Yeah.
people want to know more about what you're doing over there, you want to give them a little elevator pitch and tell them why they should be going over and following Linda with Duolingo.
Yeah, so Duolingo, they are, they have animated characters on the app,
Mhm.
and the little character moments are they come as you do the various, courses and you work your way through them. They give you encouragement and they do little celebration moments for you. And so we're working on some culture shorts with them. We have I'm working on the stories that you translate to it used to be that you would just translate stories, and now we're working on character arcs for those characters, so it's becoming a little more complex of a Duolingo world. There's a literacy app for kids, for younger kids, and there are stories there, and we are working on figuring out if we can animate those characters for anything. And I think the plan over time is just to add more animation to the app and to just keep figuring out what we can do with these characters. So if you have any interest in languages, Duolingo is a great app for learning languages. I am working my way through Spanish right now, and I am finding it easier this time around than the first time around in school. So it sort of gamifies language learning, which is making it a lot more fun. So I am, figuring out how to use animation to help make language learning more fun. So that's what I am up to, and it's been a lot of fun. So
Yeah, I can imagine. And what's been a lot of fun for me is getting to go down this road with you again. I really appreciate it. I think we might have broken the record for longest episode. We
oh
almost,
wow,
yeah, we
okay,
almost went 3 hours. So this is
wow.
between you and David Cohen, the head writer for
Mhm.
Courage the Cowardly Dog. He was a phenomenal person. He was actually our Halloween episode last year.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
cool.
he's a great dude. No better way to end this than she's been Linda. I've been Julian. This has been What's in My Head podcast. This has been another piece of your childhood. Good night.